Welcome, welcome, Eternal Life fans. I'm here with Brent Nally, life extension activist and advocate for anti-aging and everything. Has an amazing YouTube channel. Today we're going to be talking about why religious people, we're going to try to give some arguments for why religious-minded people, people who believe in God, theists of all different kinds, of all different religions, why they should be on board with this idea of curing aging, extending the human lifespan. And I'll let you start it off, Brent. I've often talked about this on my channel. And what's your position on this? How do you argue this point?
Well, first of all, Rowan, thanks for having me on the Eternal Life Fans awesome YouTube channel. It's great to have become friends with you over the last few months and build a relationship with you and the rest of our YouTube team. And I wanted to share a little bit of my perspective here, which is that I'm personally not religious, but I grew up half Catholic and half Jewish, and my parents were expecting me and my brother and sister to kind of choose a religion when we reached adulthood, 18 years of age legally. And of course, it didn't really work out that way. We grew up with both and kind of realized that, oh, this is kind of all just ridiculous in the modern world. I'm born in 1985, and I grew up on the internet, so I could research things and figure things out. But to a certain extent, you have to play along because you're a child and you don't have power. So for me, I'm a data-driven person. I'm a science-based person. And I feel like that's where the whole species is going and where we're trying to move everybody to. So hopefully you can use logic and reason to explain to people why you want to stay as biologically young and healthy as possible, and why we just don't have any proof, of what happens after we die. But we could use a little bit of logic and reason and probably think that, we don't know, right? But we do know what we have right here in reality. And I do know that I want to keep this going as long as I possibly can. So I don't think it's really a difficult thing to explain if people have an open mind. If people don't have an open mind and they don't want to learn or think about it, then good luck selling anything to anybody that doesn't have an open mind, right?
Right. And you raised the best point ever there by saying it's we don't know. And, talking about this topic on my channel, that's always what I've tried to say is that agnosticism. I've always just pushed the point of agnosticism, meaning regardless of what you believe. You may believe in this, you may believe in that, but at least admit you don't know that if there's an afterlife, that there's a God or anything. And as long as we don't know, why not bank on this life? It's the only life we know that exists for sure. And
Right.
It just seems like aging is freaking awful. Freaking the worst thing ever. Sucks. And for all we know, all these people are ceasing to exist forever, as much as they would like to think they're going somewhere after they die or anything like that. It's all just a big question mark. And let's be quite frank, it seems very wishful thinking. It's that's the best thing ever. We would all want to go to an afterlife. If that were possible, we would all want that. But it's where's the evidence? Where's the proof? Show me something a little bit more
There's no
concrete.
evidence and there's no proof of an afterlife. And the more you think about it rationally, there's no evidence or proof of a soul. There'll be religious people that will come in and say that, oh, there's all this evidence and stuff, but these are stretches. There's no real scientific evidence is the key. If you understand what the scientific method is, there's no scientific proof I've ever found, and I've researched this pretty thoroughly and talked to a lot of really smart people and tried to read a lot on the internet about this. And yeah, there's absolutely no proof of an afterlife, and there's really no evidence for it scientifically. And if you really understand, biology and reality, I'm interested in learning about reality. That's what I try to focus on, not how I want things to be, but how things are. That's what I focus on with everything in my life, because it tends to improve my life the more that I think in this way. And the more you think like that, you think, well, we probably don't have a soul. There's no evidence for it. And we're basically just these smart animals. We're much smarter than the other animals. But is there a dog heaven? Is there
All
a
dogs
chip
go to heaven. All dogs go
right?
to heaven.
Is there an insect heaven? Is there a COVID-19 heaven? Right? They say viruses aren't really alive. It's viruses are kind of not alive and are alive in this weird, like paradoxical way. But yeah, my point is there a afterlife for all species and all forms of life? And once you start thinking like that, of course, the whole concept of an afterlife just tends to break down and be even more ridiculous, because are they all in the same afterlife together? Is there, heaven? Is there hell? What's in between heaven and hell? Like, is there some type of purgatory, like heck? Like, oh man, I was stuck in heck for 17 years before I was waiting to get into heaven, like the DMV or something, like some horrible line waiting for your number to be called. It's just all pretty ridiculous stuff to me personally. So let's focus on what we do know here now. Let's try and stay as young and healthy as we possibly can. This shouldn't be very controversial. And let's just hit people with the science of what's actual possible right now, and then motivate people to, get more scientific research so that we can really even improve this more.
Right. Have you ever studied the Ernest Becker? Do you know about him and his theory that the afterlife and things like that and religions were all just created as a coping mechanism for death? It's like how people dealt with death throughout history, because they were all dying, and it's like if you're just dying, it's like you're going to create something to cope with the idea of death, and afterlife is just the obvious thing.
Yeah, I can't say that I've ever honestly heard the name Ernest Becker. Maybe I have, maybe I haven't. I'm not great with names, but that concept, yeah, 100% makes sense to me. It's what I tell people all the time, and it's what the evidence shows as well too, because people tend to get stuck in their own theistic religion and thought process. But I've studied world religions in high school, and then also in college, and then a lot just on the internet. I've just been interested in these things, and I've traveled the world quite a bit. I've been to 45 countries across 4 continents, and you just look at history, you look at different cultures, and you realize that a lot of them take a lot of the same types of stories and beliefs from each other. Who knows which one came first? But yeah, I mean, that seems to be how all religions are kind of like dealing with this whole idea of an afterlife. And quite frankly, the more you understand psychology and how this works, it's actually really smart, and it makes sense, because dying sucks, aging sucks, wars, all sorts of things. I mean, you read Steven Pinker and you realize that this is kind of the most peaceful time we've ever had. Remove the word kind of. I don't know why I said that. This is the most peaceful time we've ever had in human history, and it continues to get more and more peaceful. But yet, what does the mainstream media tell you? It tells you everything's bad, it's horrible. It's because they're trying to stimulate your amygdala so they can get you to click or watch their thing so they can sell you ads. It's very simple. That's how they make money. But really, things are getting a lot better. And as much as we're freaking out about COVID-19, it's actually good that we're actually able to have platforms like this and other platforms to at least talk about it and educate people so that they can hopefully not get the disease themselves and then not get closer to death. So I feel like we've already shifted the conversation to that, which I apologize. But I guess the whole point that I'm making here is that aging sucks. So it makes perfect sense that religious institutions would come up with ideas of why, like, it's okay and it's natural and we have to cope with it, because yeah, I mean, to a certain extent we do. I mean, I'm probably going to die at some point. In fact, almost certainly. I just want that to be as long as scientifically possible from now. And we're going to lose friends and loved ones and great people along the way, and we need to have coping mechanisms for that. And Peter Joseph from Zeitgeist, the movie, the trilogy, had a great quote that I like. I think he said it in the first Zeitgeist. He said, "Religion provides nothing except for emotional solace for those who require it." And so I just don't require that from religion because I have educated myself out of that. So I get emotional solace from more scientific things and more rational and logical things, rather than basically lying to myself using old, outdated stories that are not scientific. So that was quite a long answer, but that's kind of how I feel about this.
You know how we've talked about the language in terms of what's the best language for marketing, and some transhumanists and anti-aging activists think, oh, we shouldn't use language like live forever and immortality and everything. In I can see that being very true if you're trying to attract like this very scientific-minded people who are super skeptical. But at the same time, it's like using that language of like live forever. Seems like that's what's going to get. That's the only thing that's going to get through to the religious people, because the religious
Yeah.
people they're wrapped up into this idea of like heaven, right, and
Yeah,
eternal
eternal.
life, and so
Right.
we have to like, I think we have to come up with some like way we could like live forever because they're not going to be happy just like dying eventually, like that's that's like what I think about in
Well, the
terms of
quote,
marketing, like to market to religious people. Like the only way to do that is to say like we can live forever, like how else
totally.
can you do it?
I always like the quote, Rowan. You might have even heard me say this before. It's that you can't convince somebody of something using logic and reason when they didn't come to their current belief using logic and reason. And so this is very prevalent in this particular case, I feel, because if you believe certain things based off religion, that's faith. That's not factual. It's not scientific. You can use the scientific method in a way to get to these ideas, but ultimately they're not scientific. They are faith-based. And so that's a huge difference from what I feel like I'm trying to promote with longevity science. It's not faith-based,
Right.
it's science-based. And then I'm trying to get other people to get educated about this so we can live longer. So that's why I personally don't use that language, but your point is very well taken that, how are you going to sell somebody? I also have a sales background. How are you going to sell somebody on an idea that sounds much worse than what they already believe in? They're like, well,
Right.
I already have eternal life with Jesus,
Yeah.
so I don't need your whole longevity goobity dot gobble scientific stuff. And honestly, with those type of people and that type of mindset, it's going to be really difficult to convince them. So, like again, from my sales background, what I try and do is take the low-hanging fruit. Let's take people who are a little bit more reasonable, a little bit more rational, science-based. Maybe they just grew up in a religious household and they've never really thought deeply about this stuff. And then you can kind of educate them and get them to kind of have a more rational, scientific approach with these concepts that maybe they just haven't thought deeply enough.
Right. And I think that, I mean, a lot of religious people, they definitely fear death. Like, even if they think they're going to heaven, like, they're obviously by their actions, you can tell they fear death.
Right.
So that's a good thing on our side. We can use the fear of death and leverage that to like they still want to freaking live. And Elizabeth, Liz Parrish made this point, and I even made a quote page for her on the Eternal Life fan club. That she like, you can tell by their actions they want to live. Like
Mm-hmm.
so
I think I saw your tweet of that recently. It's a meme tweet, and I liked it. Yeah, Liz Parrish is fantastic. She has all sorts of deep, wonderful knowledge about these type of concepts. And yeah, I judge people by their actions, not really by their words. And if you look at the elite right now, I think it was the governor of Michigan just a few days ago, ended up going to get a haircut, and it was very noticeable. So when people ask, like, hey, I thought all the salons and barbershops were supposed to be closed because of COVID-19, how'd you get a haircut? And they're like, well, I'm the governor. I need to get a haircut, right? So this is what the elite always do it. And the religious people, were the elite for basically all of time until very recently. And so it's just do as I say and not as I do. So these concepts break down, when people get relatively educated. And unfortunately, we still don't have many people on this planet educated well enough, and we certainly didn't for most of history.
right. Like I've even heard arguments like that was the root of a lot of why religion was created. Like for like elite people who had a really good life, trying to make the poor people or whatever kind of happy with their meager existence because they're going to get their afterlife, they're going to get their rewards and some afterlife, so it doesn't matter. And it actually coincides with like a lot of the biblical rules in the Bible, because it says things like blessed are the poor, and it says things like it's almost like it was written by like elites who wanted
Yeah.
poor people to just be happy with like this
Blessed are
meager.
the meek, for they will
Right.
inherit the earth. Yeah.
It makes them like not want to
It's for
revolt.
it's for the day laborer who's out there, working hard, whether he's picking, fruits or doing some type of agricultural work, which is what most people did for most of history. It's so that they didn't sit there and question, like, why am I doing all this? I'm not getting anywhere. And the elite, if they had that question, the elite could say, well, maybe not in this life, but in the next, you'll have everything. In the next life,
Yes.
keep working away.
I just Googled a Bible verse, okay? Romans 13, 1, 2 says, obey the government, for God is the one who put it there. So look, it says, there is no government anywhere that God has not placed in power. So those who refuse to obey the law of the land are refusing to obey God, and punishment will follow. It's like, that's perfect for the governments, huh? It's almost like they wrote this thing, like, it's like that's what they would want people to think.
Well,
like
they
that
did.
it's basically, like, how perfect is that for them? To just get everyone to be obedient little slaves.
If you look up the root words of the two parts of the word government, there's govern and then ment. And the word govern basically means to control. And ment, if you look back far enough into its Greek origin thousands of years ago, it's mind. So it's basically government is mind control. And without getting too ridiculous, like if you've seen the movie Dinner for Schmucks, like mind control, like there's mind control, brain control is ridiculous, right? But of course, that is what governments and the elite essentially are trying to do. The mainstream media, that's what we're trying to do right now. Let's be honest. We're trying to influence your mind. We're trying to influence your thoughts. That's why they call it television programming. We're trying to literally program the way that you think, just like a software program or something. So that's what governments have been. That's what the elites have been for all of time, and that's what they will continue to be. They're trying to control certain things and get you to see things their way so they get more power, essentially. And so it makes it's no surprise to me that the more you read these old books from thousands of years ago, that these were written clearly by men, usually not by women, by men. And these were men who were, the intellectuals, the philosophers of their time, who were trying to basically say that they were, divinely inspired by their God or whatever to give them more power. It's you see it over and over and over again. Scientology,
Right.
Mormonism kind of exposed that as the newer religions. Joseph Smith, oh, only I can, see the seer stones and God talks directly to me. It's ridiculous. As more time ticks along and we move more into a scientific society, the stuff becomes just more and more ridiculous.
Right. And you got to know there's probably been instances where government has tried to put its message through various extremely popular churches or certain pastors and like tried to coerce their message to be a certain way to influence their little flock to do certain things. And I saw one pastor was even like pushing like the vaccine like in a crazy way. So it's like the government could do all kinds of things to alter public opinion through these various churches and different religions and things like that.
Right. Yeah, that's why we have the separation of church and state in America. And I don't want just the separation of church and state. I want the separation of state and money. That's why I'm a big believer in cryptocurrency, because there's two things that governments have complete monopolies over that people don't really understand, and it's being, played out right now with COVID-19 all over the planet. So governments have a monopoly on money, the power to coin money with their central banks that aren't necessarily part of the government, but they're the pseudo aspect of the government where they're semi-private and part of the government. And then the power of monopoly over violence, their armies, their police forces, and things like that. So if you take away their right to coin money and their ability to have the control of the money, then what do you see throughout all history? Eventually the armies and the police officers will stop fighting and falling in line if they can't feed themselves, if they don't have the right money. So that's why I'm a big believer in cryptocurrency, because I think that can actually change this dramatically more than people realize. That's why I think it's really important to interview people like Roger Ver that I just did. And I know it might sound like I'm plugging her a little bit or moving away.
That was a great interview. No, I was
conversation.
actually going to plug that myself. That's a great one.
Yeah, but
Everyone
that's why
go watch it.
That's why I think these things are actually really important, because everybody knows that like money controls everything, but most people don't know how money actually works and how important it is and how it's tied in. There's a reason why in America religious institutions don't pay taxes. They're tax exempt, and at what point are we going to say, like, hey, this doesn't seem completely fair, especially when you see some nefarious things that they've done, especially tied into Rome and the Vatican and things like that. So I don't know where this conversation, if I'm dragging it down a rabbit hole where
No,
you don't want to
okay
go.
to
But
get into anything really. Brent's been teaching me a lot about money. He even got me to get a Bitcoin app on my phone. So now I'm officially an investor in Bitcoin. Really cool stuff.
So you have the Bitcoin.com app, which is the company that Roger Ver is the chairman of. And you now have Bitcoin Cash. I sent you yesterday $20 of Bitcoin Cash for helping me out with some things, which I'm very appreciative of, Rowan. And yeah, man, now you're an investor. So check it out. How much is it right now? I think it's actually down. It's gone down a little bit from when I sent it to you yesterday, I believe. So my guess is that's probably worth about like $19.50 now from the $20 I sent you.
Let's see here.
So yeah, Rowan's just learning about Bitcoin Cash.
Oh yeah, $19.53. So it's gone down a bit.
There you go. Yeah, so it's down a little bit, but check it whenever you want, and you can kind of keep up with how the market's moving based there. But that's important, Rowan. Like a lot of people don't. So let's get into inflation right now and how this is how the elite take more and more power from the poor and keep giving it to themselves. So right now, Rowan's looking at that. He's like, oh man, this was $20 yesterday. Now it's $19.50. However, most people don't realize that, yes, $1 is $1, but when the government goes out and creates more money, they're actually putting more money into the supply. So it's making each one of those dollars, in this case, when the Federal Reserve creates more dollars, each dollar is technically worth a little bit less. That's what inflation is. So it's a secret theft. It's a secret tax on the poor. And it actually affects the poor much more than it does the rich for two reasons. Number one, the rich just have more money, so they can actually navigate the economic downturn better. But also, the wealthy get the money first in this case. So where's all the bailout going right now? It's going primarily to all the business people and all the corporations. They get that money first, they invest it before you, and then you come in and invest it after those asset prices that they invested in go up higher, or you know what I mean? So it's just one more way that the elite steal power from the poor and continue to give it to all of their friends and themselves.
So basically, I love what you had to say in that interview with Roger Ver about like the government and everything, like you were saying, very libertarian minded. I'm a very libertarian person myself. You mentioned even that you're a fan of Ron Paul. I'm myself huge Ron Paul fan as well. So, yeah.
Ron Paul's been talking about auditing the Federal Reserve since the early 1980s. You can find YouTube videos of him from like 1983 talking about auditing the Federal Reserve, and they still have never been audited. They came into effect in 1913. It's been 107 years, and they're this weird amalgam, just weird organization where nobody really knows it's on the books. I mean, I personally believe that the Federal Reserve is the largest Ponzi/pyramid scheme ever. And people get those two words confused, so I want to define those real quick. So a Ponzi scheme is named after this guy, Charles Ponzi, from like the 1920s. And this is what Bernie Madoff was doing. Of course, there were many Ponzi schemes throughout history before the 1920s, but this is where the term was coined. And what Bernie Madoff was doing was he was continuing to take investments with people and taking that money and using that as the actual, money to run the business when he said he was actually investing it. And then he would send them, his investors, fake paper receipts, basically telling them that their money is worth more and more and more, when really it's not. He's taking it to buy houses and yachts and live his fancy jet private lifestyle. And this works great when the economy is booming, when the investors just keep getting these statements and they think that they're getting wealthier and wealthier on paper or digitally, but it goes bad when the economy starts going downturn. They say, well, I actually want some of this money back. And then it can last for a little while if the Ponzi scheme, the person or the entity running the Ponzi scheme can kind of deflect that or navigate that, but it can hit a point where too many of the investors want too much of the money back and it doesn't actually exist because it's all gone. And the statements that they were sending them were fake. So that's a Ponzi scheme. I strongly believe the Federal Reserve is the largest Ponzi scheme we've ever seen on the planet with the US dollar because it's now been detached from gold. And then also the Federal Reserve, in my opinion, is also the largest pyramid scheme we've ever seen on the planet. And I think people are more generally familiar with what a pyramid scheme is, where it's just like a pyramid, right? And the people at the top have all the power and things like that. That's more of like your MLM marketing, your pyramid scheme type businesses that are out there where, hey, I'm selling vitamins or something like that. Well, I'll sell them to you, but I get a cut. And then that person from you, I get the biggest cut at the top. That's higher up the pyramid. But people actually hate on pyramid schemes and MLMs, but really that's kind of how the whole corporate government and corporate capitalist structure is kind of set up. I mean, I've never made more than a CEO of a company that I've worked at.
There's even a pyramid on the dollar bill.
It's all a pyramid. Yep. And yeah, you get the all seeing eye on the top. So in any event, I just turned it into money. This is your stream, Rowan, and we're talking. We can get back to religion, but the point is, like, these things are really important, and these are ways that these religious institutions can continue to influence people because they're all part of the game.
Right.
Maybe we could pull up that meme. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's like this beautiful illustration. It's like the people at the top are the bankers, and they're like, these are the ones that are the true puppet masters, and then below there, it's like you have the religious people. They're here to fool you. The religion, like the Pope, and like the people who are at the top of religions, and then like below that, I think it's well, I don't remember exactly, but it's a really good picture if you've ever seen it or can pull it up.
I haven't seen it. We'll have to find that sometime because I just did a Google search. I couldn't find it quickly, but
no worries.
The pyramid is actually a perfect segue back into religion because that's basically what God is. Like, the idea of God is the all-seeing eye at the top, basically.
Right.
It's like God sees everything. But that is another thing, is that there's also this idea of deism. This is an argument we could use for religious people because deism is the idea that even if there's a God, God might not intervene in the affairs of human beings, right? It's this idea that there's a God, but maybe God took off. Maybe God created the earth, but is doing something else and is not helping humanity in any such way. And so you could be there's ways of being a theist where there's still not a safety net. There's still not a heaven. There's still not this afterlife. There's still not this comfort with death. And so people should consider that. They should and that's why I like the idea of, like, what I talk about is like the hypothetical God, because to me that instills more of an open-mindedness of it's this agnostic version of God, because it's like hypothetical. You don't know anything about this God, and this God might not help you at all. Or the whole idea of God is like you can't know so much. It's like people claim to know everything, and that's what gets people into trouble. It's like pretending to know, and even like Sam Harris would say these things, like he had this quote that said, people need to just stop pretending to know things they don't know. And it's just like that's always been something on my radar.
Just stop lying, right? Like, it's 2020. We have the internet. All these politicians are basically a joke. What was it? Max in our group, on our Facebook group yesterday, sent us a video, like a 7-minute video of all Joe Biden's goofs during the last few months while he's been campaigning. And I feel like Joe Biden has dementia. I'm not on Trump or Joe Biden's side. I think the whole thing's ridiculous. But after watching the first 5 minutes of that, I'm like, my goodness, this man is in his late 70s, and he clearly has some type of brain disorder because he doesn't know where he is. They showed him saying, "Oh, it's great to be in Vermont," and he's in New Hampshire. And it's like all this stuff. And so it's, at what point is it's like, hey, it's 2020. We have the internet. We have ways to verify things. And so much of our institutions and the leaders of our institutions are just failing us because they're just liars, right? I mean, let's not try and be ambiguous in any way. They're liars, right? And anytime you have somebody lying to you, it's best to, walk away or find a way to separate and part from that relationship as soon as possible. We want people who are genuine and honest and transparent. And yeah, any of these religious institutions who tell you that they know that it's this way when there's no way that they can know that, that's the good sign to walk the other way.
Right. Like, I just love agnosticism. There was this amazing scene from South Park. Did you ever watch the agnosticism episode?
I've seen every episode of South Park and Seinfeld multiple times, and I know that's something that we share, that those are our two favorite comedies.
Yes. So there was this agnosticism episode where like the agnostics were like they showed this agnostic family, and it was so funny.
Which one was
I should
this?
pull that clip up. Let me see. The agnostic South Park. I'm gonna pull that clip up.
You're not talking about the Richard Dawkins ones with the otters eating food off their tummies, were you? Not that one.
I'm talking about the. Here, I found it. Okay.
Okay.
So it's the agnostic prayer. Yeah. Let me.
And while you're pulling that up, I think I've told you I like the term agnostic a little bit more. It's just the same thing as agnostic, but with an I instead of an A. And it's basically, it makes you define your terms first, because part of the problem with this is linguistical and semantical. And I'm a communications major, so I studied a lot of these linguistics, semantics, study of language and history of language. And so part of the problem is here you say the word like God or love or hell or evil, and all these words are subjective and they mean different things to different people. They're very emotional. So that's when the conversation kind of breaks down. This is evil, that's evil. It's like, well, so you have to define your terms, and then when you get into this actual scientific type of situation here where you're defining your terms, then you realize really quickly that the people trying to lie and say things that can't possibly be true get exposed, you know?
Right. All right, so did you see my screen? Did you see the video?
I can actually see your OBS software as well, too, so with like us in there a bunch.
Right. Okay, do you see now? You just see the...
Yeah, so maybe make that full screen for the audience if you can.
Okay, let's see. Let's do that. That's a good idea. I should just make it full screen.
Yeah, you can move the OBS and you just make that one full screen there. Yeah, right there.
Let's see.
There we go.
Oh, it's still not in my...
The OBS comes up over it.
Wait a second. Wait.
So while Rowan is doing this, I'll let the audience know that Rowan's kind of like an OBS wizard. I've learned so much. So
yeah, I don't have it set up for a full screen mode. So
okay,
but
no worries.
But let's play that. Let's see what they think and you think.
And if this food comes as a gift from some divine intelligence, we understand that an intelligent being cannot blame us for questioning its existence. Nobody knows, nobody can know if any deity is watching over us. Amen.
Isn't that good? I love that.
That's my kind of prayer right there.
Yeah. I think agnosticism solves so many problems. Because, and you can be an agnostic atheist, you could be an agnostic theist. That's what I am. I would consider myself... someone even just asked in the chat if I'm an atheist. I consider myself a theist at this point, because if you believe in the simulation theory, Elon Musk really kind of hooked me into this idea of the simulation theory. It seems so plausible. And if you believe in the simulation theory, pretty much you can't claim to be an atheist.
Hey, Rowan, do you want to remove the things there so we can see you again? I think it's still on the OBS.
Good
stuff,
idea.
So. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, if you believe in the simulation theory, it's like you can't really claim to be an atheist, because if we're in a simulation, that's what you believe, then it's like, well, who created the simulation, right? Like, who the heck knows? And wouldn't that be called God or something?
Yeah, it's really weird, because I actually believed in the simulation theory before I knew Elon Musk was a fan, and I think talked publicly about it. So once I heard him start talking about it, I think around 2016 or so, and then he so eloquently stated it, the sales pitch of it, I was completely hooked, because Elon Musk is a genius. Any genius should be able to take a really complex concept and make it like super simple and concise. And so I'll make it as simple. I'll just basically repeat what Elon Musk says about the simulation theory. He's like, listen, maybe 50, 60 years ago, we had the first like video games with Pong, and they were so simple. It was like deek, 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 like one little ball going back and forth. It's that simple. Now we have these almost like realistic type, video game environments and virtual reality. And so if you just extrapolate this further, eventually, if we don't, barring we don't get destroyed by an asteroid or some crazy catastrophe doesn't happen, COVID-19 kills us all or some other virus or pandemic, just keep on extrapolating out the fact that technology just keeps getting better and better and better. Eventually, I hope people can understand that it will basically be indistinguishable from reality. And so once we have that, then we don't even have to have that. Once you understand and can grasp that concept, then you have to ask the question, well, if that's possible, then who's to say that we're not already in that virtual reality right now and that this isn't all just like a simulation? And so that's what makes the most sense to me. It seems like not just plausible, it seems to make 100% sense. So then you look at these really smart physicists who have actually been kind of looking into this idea for a really long time, and you listen to what they have to say and what the mathematical models have to say, and they basically say that it's like almost a mathematical certainty that we're in a simulation. So,
right. So the question then becomes, if we're in a simulation, let's say, let's go that far and just say, for hypothetical sake, that we're in a simulation. Who the heck created it? Some people think it's an advanced society that created it. Like our future advanced society would have created then this simulation. It's an ancestor simulation, right? But really, it's like, that's where I come to the hypothetical God idea. I just call it the hypothetical God. Like, who the heck knows? It could be someone in their basement. It could be like basically a criminal act. Maybe a future society wouldn't allow such simulations because it's very kind of mean, if you think about it, to have people suffer, conscious beings to suffer. Why would a future society allow that sort of thing? When you think of a future society, you think of someone who's like people who are pretty advanced and like they're not going to allow for all this kind of suffering. So at this point, I'm thinking it's got to be some like criminal in their basement or something, like doing it apart so the government doesn't know about it. Like, you know what I mean?
I don't know. I mean, I know what you mean, but I disagree a bit because in order to experience joy, sometimes you need pain. I mean, look at us all kind of coped up in our houses right now. If you're following the laws to a certain extent of most governments. So once this is all over and people can kind of go out more and start doing more things, even things that are just out of your control, forget even following laws. Like there's certain things that are just closed down now that you can't do. Once those things hopefully open back up, then it's kind of like, back to normal. This is great. Whereas like certain things that might seem great are just mundane. So this is just kind of like how reality works, something that's really.
But have you ever thought like, just think of the worst type of suffering, not like trivial types of suffering from day to day, but like, I don't know, someone who's like been tormented in a basement, repeatedly raped for 20 years. It's like,
right.
Would a future society be okay with that? Like, let's just turn this simulation on and allow these people to just like, or like the starving children in Africa, or just some of the horrible, most horrendous suffering. Like, why would they do that?
Yeah, I see your point, but then you have to think about all life, right? So what about like COVID-19? Like that's a virus. A lot of people, like the scientists say it's not alive, it's it certainly can't live without a host, but we're like killing COVID-19. Like what a bunch of assholes, right? Us humans are really mean. We're destroying this virus thing that just wants to live. Why don't we, it's not that simple, unfortunately, the way that reality actually works. We kill plants and animals to live, even
right.
Vegans out there, they don't want to kill suffering. Well, plants, suffer too. Science has measured that in certain ways. And even if you don't believe in the suffering argument of plants, they are living and we're killing them to get their energy. I mean, nature is a rough place out there and reality is complex. And unfortunately, I think you're just never going to get rid of suffering. I think the key that we want as humans is we want to be on team human, and we want to try and alleviate as much suffering for humans and other sentient beings and conscious beings that we find on the planet and other places in the universe, because all life is not created equally. I'm sorry to say that, but Elon Musk's life is worth way more than, a 99-year-old person who's on his deathbed, with COVID-19. I mean, it just is. If we can have a vote on the planet on whose life we'd want to save, I'd hope we'd try and save Elon Musk, because he is tremendously doing good things for this planet, as an example. So not everybody will agree with what I say. Some people will say that is like insensitive, but if you're forced to make these decisions, like if you had a gun to your head and had to choose, I hope everybody would make the right choice there. And so in the same sense, we want to be on team human, and we want to people to focus on extending the life of all of us and improving not just our lives, but our lifespan and our quality of life. That's key too. I don't just want to live hundreds or thousands of years. I want all technology to improve so that we can maybe be doing this in a better virtual reality 20 years from now, where we have teletactile abilities, where I can reach out and touch you in some weird way, and we can just communicate more efficiently and be in some crazier, weirder, cooler virtual reality,
Heck yeah. When you say team human, that reminds me of a Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan did this stand-up comedy routine about vegans who are on team animal. They're all obsessed with saving the animals, and he's like team human. He'd and I've always had that opinion that humans, as much as we love animals, and I'm not for animal suffering or anything like that, it's I'm on team human. I want to save the humans first. The humans are more important than the animals. And he was just kind of making fun of all these animal activists who are just hyper obsessed with saving the animals, but they're they're not caring so much about humans. It's just weird.
Yeah, like the PETA people.
Yeah.
It's if anybody's ever seen a show called Bullshit, Penn and Teller Bullshit, it was on Showtime from 2003 to 2010. Really great show. They did an episode on PETA that's fantastic that I want animal rights activists to check out, because they show some pretty nefarious things that PETA has been involved in, and shows kind of their true intentions of their founder.
Yeah, I've watched a few things on PETA. They're a pretty scummy organization in a lot of ways.
Yeah, they're ruthless, man. It's pretty... Now, at the same time, am I for animal cruelty? No. Am I for factory farming? No. It's one of the reasons I'm sitting where I am right now here in Folsom, California. My wife and I decided to quit our jobs, sell our home a little over 2 years ago. And then in June of 2019, we decided to move up here from the San Francisco Bay Area to be closer to her brother-in-law, who also quit his high-paying job at Amazon as an electrical engineer, manager, to buy 37 acres and start an organic farm. And so now they have all these chickens. We're eating their eggs. We're eating the actual meat. They have meat chickens that they use to eat the meat, and then they have separate chickens for the eggs. They have a whole organic farm. They're building it out even more with lots of vegetables. The fruit trees, unfortunately, are going to take a few more years until they're going to be, hopefully producing great fruit. And same thing with the nut trees. That's hopefully going to be in the next couple of years or so. But you have to be the change you want to see in the world. We can't change everything, but you can start with changing yourself. And then once you've kind of made that change in yourself, then you can scale it out to benefiting other people. It's kind of like, Rowan, I've used this analogy before, but I know you don't ride on planes. But for those people who do ride on planes, what they tell you every single time, when you normally don't listen because you've heard it 100 times, when you get on the plane, they say, hey, in case of an emergency, the oxygen mask will come down. Make sure you put the oxygen mask on yourself first so that you can take care of your neighbor, right? Because you're no good if you're dead, if you don't get the oxygen for yourself first. So that's kind of I'm more of a James Altucher type mindset, where his message is save yourself, and that's kind of more of a free market capitalistic message, is that if you're going out there and you're trying to take care of yourself, not in a nefarious way, but in a genuine way, then you can take care of yourself, improve yourself. And then people naturally want to be around successful people as well, too. That's why it was so great for me to interview Roger yesterday, and why, I've gotten relatively good feedback since the video went live, a few hours ago on YouTube from the comments that came in, because he's a great person. Once you get to know him and understand him, he's super intelligent. He reads tons of books, and he's always trying to improve himself. And I want to be around people like that, and that's why I enjoy being around you, Rowan.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's definitely. If you could interview Elon Musk, let's say, I'm curious because you're a huge Elon Musk fan. What kind of questions would you ask him? I'd want to pick his brain about who he thinks created the simulation, because he never talks about that. He talks about how he believes in the theory, but he never goes into like, okay, I mean, well, who created it? Like, also, did you answer that question? Who do you think created the simulation theory? I mean, who do you think created it? Do you think it's like a future society type thing?
No, I have no idea. Obviously, it's the same type of religious question that we kind of make fun of. It's just all kind of repackaged in a new age, sciencey type of way. I think it's an interesting question. I think it's a question that we should continue to ask, but it's not a scientific question. There's science that you can use to try and answer that question, but ultimately, as of right now, from what I've investigated, it's not a scientific answer. So
Right.
I have the only answer for me is I have no idea. I've watched a lot of documentaries. I've read a lot of stuff on this over the years. I think it's very interesting, but I have no idea, and nobody does.
Yeah, someone in the audience says it's a hypothesis. Exactly. That's why I call the hypothetical God. Everything's all hypothesis when it comes to this stuff.
But to answer your question, what would I ask Elon Musk? Every single thing I would ask him would be, at least to start, would be all about longevity. He's clearly interested in it based off, if you're kind of like a super fan of his and you've watched enough of his interviews and enough things that he said, and the fact that, Grimes is currently carrying his baby, and that Grimes is his girlfriend and she's super interested in it, and many, many other things. There's dead giveaways that he's, fascinated and wants to live as long and healthy as possible. But for some reason, he doesn't like talking about it. And, we can't put ourselves in his shoes. He's worth, whatever, $40 billion or so right now. He's running Tesla, which is a public company. He's running SpaceX. He has big investors, pension funds, entire endowments, of governments are invested in Tesla and SpaceX and things like that. Private hedge funds. He's got to be careful what he says to a certain extent as a smart business person, but he's clearly a longevity enthusiast, and I just wonder what I would love to pick his brain on those thoughts, and maybe once we get past that, I just want to talk more about his plans for SpaceX and Tesla and Neural Link, and then also Boring Company, I think, as well too. Boring Company could end up being worth more than Tesla at some point. It's what a lot of people don't realize if you think about the business model of it. Just type into Google something along the lines of Boring Company worth more than Tesla. You don't necessarily have to do that right now, Rowan, but if people are interested, just do that. I've watched a couple good YouTube videos on it in the last few months that make some pretty compelling cases, because Boring Company is just getting started up. Like, this was not a thing anybody was doing until kind of Elon Musk, with whoever he's friends with, came up with this idea and then started iterating, and now it's a thing. Like, the project is going to be done in Las Vegas pretty soon here, as we sit here in April 2020. And then they're going to get contracts with other local municipalities, and it could start getting real interesting in the years to come. We could actually, and this all spurred from the fact that Elon Musk hates traffic. Like, I loathe traffic as well too. Like, we all hate traffic, but he lives in like the Los Angeles area. He lives in not Beverly Hills, but what's the other one? Where Fresh Prince of Bel Air. He lives in Bel Air.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then SpaceX is in Hawthorne, so that's his commute. And, that's what he's building first for the Boring Company, right? Just a commute from his house straight to the office. And that's why Kobe Bryant, had a helicopter, because he got around traffic for a while, but he didn't beat death, unfortunately. I don't mean to speak any ill will of Kobe Bryant. I thought he was a great person, and it's really tragic that he died, but it should just be a reminder for everybody to be super careful. You know, helicopters are not really a great, safe way to travel. I rode in a helicopter in Kauai on my honeymoon with my wife 4.5 years ago. It was incredible. It's the only time I've done it. I might do it again, but I'm not signing up to ride in a helicopter every single day. Like those probabilities will catch up with you eventually. And unfortunately, I caught up with him and his daughter and a few other people.
Yeah, it's very sad. I rode in a helicopter in Hawaii too, and I regret it. I regret it.
What island?
I vowed never to do it again. It was I think Kauai, actually. Kauai.
Yeah, it's beautiful, right? Did you go across the rainiest place on the planet?
Can't remember. All I remember is images of Hawaiian jungles.
Rowan, I just realized you're an Alls I Remember guy, huh?
Alls I remember?
Did you notice that you said that?
Did I say that? Alls I remember?
Mm-hmm.
Is that
it's funny.
Is that technically incorrect?
Well, yeah, you said alls I remember. What you meant is all I remember.
All I remember. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so
Alls
that seems to be more of a Midwestern type of thing, though. But so where are you
Maybe I
originally?
picked up some Midwestern slang on my Immortality bus tour. There was a bunch of Midwestern. We passed right through the Bible Belt.
Okay.
I don't.
Did you notice that you did that? Is that a normal quirk that you have?
I didn't notice. No.
Okay.
I don't know.
Check it out on the live stream when you watch or something.
Now it's probably something I do. Alls I remember. Yeah, I didn't even know that's incorrect.
It's kind of like people who say wash. I'm going to go wash the clothes, and like, where's the R in wash? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Weird stuff. Little quirks that people pick up. Oh, this is so strange. So since we're speaking of helicopters, I'm the one that brought it up. My wife calls them hillcopters, like Hill, helicopters. And it's something that I always point out, try to in a kind way. And now she's like 50-50 after many, many years of pointing it out to her. But it's just a subconscious thing where she can't really change it at this point.
So anything else we could talk about? If let's say there's some religious people watching, what can we say to them? Anything else that we can say to them to try to convince them that they should cure aging, and instead of donating to their church, then donate to anti-aging, right?
Donate to SINS, donate to us. We're trying to, interview scientists and make these ideas more popular so that scientists can get more money. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to be going out buying mansions with any type of money and power and influence that I get. I'm going to be just using the resources that I get to make production value better, network better with people, give more power to scientists, give them a bigger voice. COVID-19 right now is a huge opportunity for the longevity community to let everybody know that COVID-19 is an aging-related disease strongly. 95% of people who have died that tested positive for COVID-19 are over the age of 50. I mean, this is not like the flu, the normal influenza. This is not like the common cold, which is also a coronavirus. This particular COVID-19 hates mamas and papas, that's for sure. So I can't think of a better time to actually educate people that 110,000 people approximately die of aging every single day, and we don't seem to give two shits about it globally based off dollars, right? We're not investing enough money in research. So now's the time to change that. That's what I'm really passionate about. I know you are. I know probably most people watching are. Like, this is the time to do that. So yeah, stop donating to the church. Stop donating to almost anything else. This is the biggest problem on the planet. If you define the problem as dying, people dying, this is killing more than about 150,000 people die every day. About 110,000 of those from aging or age-related diseases. So yeah, these problems are not just going to solve themselves. We have to invest in that. A lot of people say, when are we going to cure aging? I don't know. When are you going to quit your job like I did and start working full time for free to educate people about this and make change? Or whatever else you're doing. When are you going to start a company that's going to cure aging or help do that? That's what I say to people when they say, when's this going to happen? I don't know, man. It doesn't look like it's going to happen anytime soon, the way we're all just sitting back and hoping and wishing it's going to happen. Or most people are just completely ignorant about this. They have no idea. Most people are just watching sports or eating Cheetos or both. Who knows, right?
Yes. That's unfortunate that people don't care more about this. And that includes, we're not, and it's religious people and secular people that just don't care about
Right.
this. You know, it's, yeah. And when I said agnosticism, right, that should go for, I think, secular people and religious people. They should all be agnostics, because you could be an agnostic theist, you could be an agnostic atheist. It's just about not claiming to know everything, right?
Yeah, it just comes down to two really, simple words: don't lie.
Right.
Right,
What do
and
you
don't lie.
personally
Don't.
categorize yourself in that? I've seen the chart. There's a chart that says you could be an agnostic atheist, you could be a gnostic atheist, an agnostic theist, or a gnostic theist. Have you seen that chart? There's like, it divides it in four.
Yeah. So personally, I don't like titles because I don't like to be pigeonholed into like a word. But if I have to be pigeonholed, I would call myself agnostic with an I. And when it comes to like political views and economics and stuff, I would call myself a voluntarist. So with agnosticism, as I mentioned, it requires a dialogue, a conversation between people, so that you can define terms, so that when you're talking about God, you can clearly define that. I mean, look up God in the dictionary and go have fun with all of those definitions, right? Look up love in the dictionary. Look up evil in the dictionary or on Wikipedia, however ways people, good luck. Have fun with that. And this is just the English language. Keep in mind that there's, hundreds of spoken language, thousands of spoken languages, and yeah, you have to define your terms. And agnosticism is the only mindset that I know of that actually like starts off with that, because that's really, really important. Otherwise, you're falling into a trap of like miscommunication, in my opinion.
Yeah, because a lot of people, for instance, I'm sure a lot of atheists who believe in the simulation theory, they wouldn't necessarily call that God. But to a lot of other people, it seems like a God, because it has a lot of the same factors. I've even heard the simulation theory be called like the heaven for atheists and everything like this, because it's so godlike, because it's like, that's a powerful thing. It sees everything. It
kind of falls into the intelligent design, argument, which is kind of just a new religious thing. And a lot of people think Ray Kurzweil stuff is just like some new religion. And in a way, I see that, with people just believing that in 2045 we're all going to, live indefinitely. And I certainly do not believe that, even though I greatly respect Ray Kurzweil and I hope that he's right. Please, Ray, be right. I just haven't joined the cult just yet, even though I've read all of his books. I've interviewed him, super fan. But I'm a really logical, rational, data-driven person, and we can't assume that things are just going to happen. We have to work to make them happen, and it's really hard work that we have to do. And we do not have enough momentum right now at all. Like, we want to get a snowball effect going right now. We need that snowball to be ginormous. And right now, it's not even like the size of a speck of dust, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think about those religious transhumanists, like the ones we interviewed? We interviewed the Mormon girl. Forgot her name. Could you remind me of refresh my memory?
Yeah, her Michael Ann, and I don't remember her last name. Michael Ann something. Really nice lady. She's the founder, or she's the CEO of the Mormon Transhumanist Association, and then Micah, the founder and CEO of the Christian Transhumanist Association.
So these are examples of people who can be religious yet very into curing aging.
Right. I would actually, they probably wouldn't even admit this, and no disrespect to them, but I don't think that they're religious. I think that they are people who grew up religious, and I think that they still associate with those people, but they're clearly trying to convert them to transhumanism and science at this point. And they're using their cultural, religious background and their knowledge and their skill set there to transition those people to transhumanism, which hopefully will not become a new religion. Hopefully it will be, science-based. And again, that's why like I don't like to get caught up in these terms and pigeonholed into I'm a transhumanist, you know. I seem to believe a lot of the same things that a lot of the forward-thinking transhumanists do, like Zoltan Itzvan, Gennady Stolyarov, many others. You know, I've just wrote an article for the Immortalist magazine. However, like when you meet me on the street or start having a conversation with me, I certainly don't. You won't hear me say like I'm a transhumanist. You know, within the first 30 seconds or few minutes of my conversation, it's
Right.
not how I identify myself. I identify myself as a data-driven, science-based human.
Right, because then people will, if you hear say transhumanist, people will think mind uploading, chips in the brain, everything
Right.
like this. Like we don't. A lot of transhumanists who might identify with that group of people a lot. We still don't want to. We want the physical body. We like our bodies. We don't want to like put chips in our brain. We don't want to. A lot of us don't even think mind uploading is a viable way to preserve your consciousness. They think it's just like, I don't think it is. What do you think?
No, we've talked, Rowan, you and I have talked about this. I don't think
Yeah.
that it is either. If it is, it's way off. We also, interviewed Peter Voss, the man who coined the term AGI, artificial general intelligence. I'm scheduled to interview Ben Gortzel on April 21st. So subscribe to my YouTube channel so that you don't miss that interview. Hopefully it'll be really good. He just followed me on Twitter yesterday, which is kind of like crazy to me because Ben's the man. And if people don't know, Ben Gortzel is the gentleman who owns the company that created Sophia, the robot that got citizenship from Saudi Arabia in 2017. And so, yeah, none of this stuff is promised. We don't know. And that certainly seems like way far off to me. And yes, I understand the power of exponentials. I get it. I promise I do. And COVID-19 is a good reminder to all of us about that. But mind uploading, like, have you studied biology? Do you have any idea how complex biology is? Like,
Right.
We don't think about it. Like, you keep on going further and further down the, smaller and smaller to the Planck length. So Max Planck, one of the original creators of quantum physics, there's something called the Planck length or Planck scale, Planck, and it's supposed to go all the way down to the smallest part of the universe. And I mean, we don't even know. Like, you have a atom, and then inside an atom is these electrons and neutrons and protons, and you open those up, and what's in there? Quarks. And then I think scientists have I haven't studied this stuff in a few years, but scientists like open up quarks, and I think they found something that's inside of there, right? This just seems to be a rabbit hole that just keeps on going further and further. So who's to say that any one of those things is not an important, like, if we are in a simulation, the simulation theory to me is like really empowering, because it tells us that, okay, if this is all like the Matrix, if it's all just a big computer, then that means we should be able to decode it. So let's say, for example, inside that quark, there's something in there that's maybe it's quantum. It can be a quantum computer that control it with qubits, right? Or it could just be a computer which is 0 or 1. That's still something that we don't yet understand. So saying that we're going to build something like create a new human when we're made up out of these complex structures and we've never done it before, it just seems like I created a human, me and my wife. He's 4.5 months old. He's sleeping in the other bedroom. But saying that we're just going to do this, like mind uploading to me, like into a computer, a non-biological thing, I don't know. Maybe I'm too dumb. Maybe AGI will be able to solve this, and my little monkey brain can't figure it out right now. But I'm very skeptical of it, and I think that it's a long way off. And most importantly, I don't think it's super productive for us to be
distraction.
spending much
I've always
time
said
on it.
that.
It's a distraction.
It's a distraction from the real goal of curing aging.
Right.
For sure, 100%.
That's what I'm focused on. That's what it all comes back to me. Even if we can't cure aging, let's at least just chip away at this problem a little bit more. Slow, stop, and reverse it,
I guess even the simulation theory is kind of a distraction as well from just the real goal. Just let's cure freaking aging.
It's cool to think about.
It is.
It might be important. We never know how reality's dots can connect to lead to the next coolest thing to help us solve problems. So I'm glad I know it. I'm happy to chat about it every now and then here or there, but it certainly shouldn't I don't recommend it take up too much more of your time because, I'll tell you one story that I love. It's really sad, but it's important. My grandmother died in 2008. It's my dad's mom, and she was a smoker for about 60 years. I think she died in her late 70s. Maybe she was early 80s. And she started smoking very young, around 13 or so. Smoked probably 2 packs a day most of her life. And she died. She had COPD, emphysema, Parkinson's. She was on 8 pharmaceuticals at some point. Saw her hallucinate, seeing some guy in a mask, like carjack a car. And that certainly didn't happen. I was standing right there. It's just really sad to see a loved one get old and decrepit and fall apart. And her official cause of death is pneumonia, but that's, of course, not what really killed her. It was, all the smoking and the aging, the COPD and the emphysema and the Parkinson's. In the same respect, you have a lot of people right now dying with stage 4 cancer, when they're testing positive for COVID-19, and they're one of those statistics, died of COVID-19. And I'm sure it goes the other way, too. I'm sure there's people who have died of COVID-19 who aren't counted in the statistics. So I don't want people to get too emotional either way. I'm just saying, our data and statistics is not great on this. But in any event, to get back to my grandmother, the last few years of her life, whenever I would go visit her and then leave her, I was in high school at this point, I would say, Grandma, is there anything that I can get you before I leave? And it wasn't just me. My parents and my brother and sister, the same thing would happen to them. And she would say, time. Just time. And it's one of those things that really influenced me to be more of because this is like 2005, 6, 7, 8. And so I've never really told you this story, Rowan, but this is another big thing that got me thinking man, I'm going to die one day too. And this looks horrible, like a slow, painful death. My wife's grandmother right now is 95 years old. She's locked in her nursing home now. They don't even let her leave because of COVID-19. It's really sad. We can't even go visit her. And her parents, my wife's parents can't go visit her because they're in their late 60s, They need more time. I bet if my wife's grandmother knew everything that I knew right now, if she knew that 50 years ago, I would imagine she probably would have lived her life a little bit differently trying to cure aging, because none of this stuff is guaranteed. And I don't want to be on my deathbed saying, man, I should have tried a little bit harder.
More time. Right. That reminds me of the Jupiter Ascending. Do you ever watch that movie by the creators of The Matrix?
I've seen it 4 times. I tell a lot of people about that movie. I think it's phenomenal. Remember, it's telomeres. They're basically, remember that's what the elite have, and that's how they're living longer by using essentially, as far as I'm concerned, they don't say it exactly from what I remember, but it's some form of telomerase gene therapy. Basically, they colonize planets and they're using all the youth and all the people there as their youth. They have a way of taking that and extracting it and putting it into them. And they say something about telomeres in that movie. And that movie was 2012, I think.
Yeah, I like that character who, she says, time is the single most precious commodity in the universe. And it's so true. That is.
It is so true. And that's why all the Silicon Valley, multi-billionaires now are trying to get into this space a little bit. I don't think they're doing it in the most intelligent way. They're learning, and it's a really difficult problem to solve, obviously, curing aging. But that's why they're doing it. I mean, if you're Jeff Bezos, you got $130 billion. What is it that you can't buy? He owns the Washington Post. He's bought influence. He's, has his own little media outlet there. He owns anything that he could possibly want. He wants more time, and he doesn't just want old, decrepit Jeff time. He wants young, healthy Jeff time, as much of that as he can get. So that's what I want too. That's what I've already focused on. I mean, I walked away from a decent amount of money working at LinkedIn a couple of years ago to focus on this, and sometimes I wonder, am I crazy? But I'm really happy with the people I've been networking with and connecting with, and the things that I've learned and I'm continuing to learn. And I think it's really, really important to understand the biggest problem on the planet, which is not climate change. It's not X, whatever you think that it might be and you're told in the mainstream media. It is aging, no doubt. If you define a problem by something that's killing 110,000 people, more than 2/3 of the people right now, not in 5 years, not in 10 years, not in 100 years, not this thing that we're being told about scary climate change coming for us, or scary overpopulation coming for us, or scary whatever boogeyman, the oceans warming, whatever. I'm not even saying all that stuff isn't real. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that what I do know is that right now, the biggest problem on the planet is that 110,000 people are dying of aging and age-related diseases. Yet we've reversed aging, biological aging in human cells. We did this 20 years ago at Geron Corporation using telomerase gene therapy. Those human fibroblasts, skin cells, got younger in every way that they measured them. We've reversed aging in many different animal species. Greg Fay, who hopefully I'll be interviewing next month in May, he has reversed 9 men's biological age according to the Steve Horvath DNA methylation clock by about 2.5 years, over 1 year's time. So from 1 year later, they are 2.5 years biologically younger, but because 1 year passed, they're 1.5 years biologically younger. But those are 9 people. Like, we need, and they were all men from age like 50 to 70. We need a huge cohort of this. This is what the research needs to do. Like, we're just getting started. Yeah. I don't want this research to take off when I'm like 70 and it's too late. Aubrey de Grey is convinced that that reversing aging is the most important thing, and I agree with him there. But he's convinced that we're going to do this in humans. I'm not so convinced. I'm doing everything that I can to stay as biologically young as possible right now, so that if it is super difficult to reverse aging, maybe it turns out to be easier to just like slow it down, Right. And while the Greg Fay stuff is super interesting, I know you watched that interview as well, Rowan, maybe you can link it in here. It's still like so early. It was 1 year, this study. It could be an effect like steroids, where you take steroids, you get short-term benefits, you get stronger, but then in the long term, it's downhill, bad news bears. So we just don't know. We need way more research. We need it in humans. We need it now. And we need people to really understand and get on board about this immediately.
Yeah, I was really excited with what he had to say about the thymus regeneration. That was very exciting. It wasn't really on my radar much. I had heard kind of a little bit about it, but not a lot. But
let's summarize that real quick, just for the audience. Yeah. So basically, what Greg Fay and his team did is they were able to regenerate the thymus using 3 things: HGH, human growth hormone; metformin, a very well-known and tested for like over 70 years globally drug that comes from a plant called berberine, and it's been used as treatment for type 2 diabetics, and turns out those type 2 diabetics actually end up living longer than normal people without type 2 diabetes, and they they actually avoid many of the chronic conditions that type 2 diabetics succumb to in death. And then the third thing is DEA, like that you take with an omega-3 pill or something. So he just gave those 9 men specific doses of those 3 things. Steve Horvath of UCLA actually was part of this study, so they made sure that they did proper blood work and had their DNA methylation, Steve Horvath clock tested before and after. And this is the first time that we've actually shown biological age reversal of humans according to the DNA methylation Steve Horvath clock, which is, considered to be the gold standard of biological aging by many longevity thought leaders that I've interviewed. So this is really exciting. It's getting hardly any press. Keith Kometo worked out a deal to get Greg Fay on the Young Turks, and Cenk Unger interviewed him. I think it was in late September of 2019. That's great, but where's the mainstream media? Where's all the big articles? Why isn't this front page news? I mean, my goodness, we have reversed aging in humans, live humans, using the most agreed upon standard for biological aging, which is the Steve Horvath clock. And the way that they did this is it actually regenerated the thymus, and the way that it does that actually is by what's believed is the thymus recruits hemopoietic stem cells from your bone marrow, and then turns those hemopoietic stem cells into T cells in your thymus. And those T cells go off and they build your immune system by fighting viruses like COVID-19, and the common influenza, and the common cold, which is a different coronavirus, and all other sorts of viruses, right? And there's good viruses out there too. Like, we probably wouldn't have evolved as humans. Babies, we wouldn't be able to carry babies to full term without a specific virus. So not all viruses are bad, but this actually this actually happened, with Greg Fay's study, and it's super exciting. And they're working on doing a bigger study now with a larger cohort and more controls and more funding, but it's still just a tiny little fraction of what it should be. So if you're watching this right now and you're hearing about this, man, go research Greg Fay, type in anti-aging hacks, Greg Fahy into YouTube, watch that interview, and then follow Leaf's YouTube channel, subscribe, Lifespan.io's YouTube channel. I'm going to be doing work for them, and I'm going to be hopefully interviewing Greg sometime in late May, maybe about 6 weeks from now on that YouTube channel. So
I almost wish that transhumanism was more like a religion, because then it would be a lot more popular. Religion seems to have some magical formula to like boost its popularity. It propagates like a virus. It's a mind infecting thing that just, in a sense, that brainwashing quality of religion is very productive and efficient.
It's a really good point, Rowan, and here's something that like most people aren't fully aware of. So at least for America, the right to religious freedom is written into the Constitution. And a lot of people don't fully grasp and understand the ramifications of this. So you're allowed to practice whatever religion that you want as long as you actually believe that religion truly, and you can't be committing a scam or something like that. So this is why the Church of Perpetual Life, Bill Falloon's church that he founded in southern Florida, is actually able to exist because this is what they actually believe, and they are not committing or perpetrating any type of a fraud. They truly, Bill Falloon eats, breathes, sleeps, shits, everything. This whole mindset of trying to slow, stop, and reverse aging and have perpetual life here on Earth. So with that mindset, we can create any type of religion that we want, Rowan. It doesn't have to be transhumanism. You and I, or you yourself, or myself, your Eternal Life fan club, you could turn that into a religious institution that's tax-free. You get tax benefits from it. There's lots of ways that you could set things up that way. And as long as you actually truly believe that, you're not creating any type of a problem as far as the U.S. government is involved. And a lot of people just don't fully understand how that really works. It's pretty fascinating.
Right, like you could make a religion based off the simulation theory, and it basically have a lot. You could use that to replicate a lot of religious concepts, because the simulation theory is so malleable to so many possibilities.
Right.
And that whole even like the idea of karma. The simulation theory makes karma an actual real possibility, that like there's justice, and there's because that sort of system could be implemented in a simulation theory. If we're in a simulation, a system like karma and ultimate types of justice could actually be programmed into it in some fashion, right? So, and that's
totally.
very similar to the whole fear of God idea with typical religions and Christianity. It's that fear of God, that the God's going to judge you for your actions. There's some kind of test involved in this life. There's this morality test. I like that whole concept. I want to kind of inject some of that into transhumanism in general, because I think it's good. It's something that's one of religion's more better aspects, because then it gets people to behave morally, and they're thinking they're gonna have to be accountable for their actions and justice and everything. It's kind of cool.
I feel like we're kind of doing that in a way with technology and with all these tracking systems, CCTV cameras everywhere. They're all over China. I've seen some interesting documentaries on Vice and stuff about how China's set up right now. And now they have facial recognition technology with the CCTV cameras. They're tracking everybody and everything. And again, it sounds kind of crazy, but these governments, mind control, they are kind of turning into a lot of these concepts that we have had for thousands of years about, God and religion. And so to me, it's pretty scary, because if you know much about the communist Chinese government, I mean, they're called the People's Democratic Republic of China. And according to language and facts, objective facts and definitions, they're clearly not that. They are communist and they're centralized. And it's a very small group of people at the top that control everything. And now President Xi, their president, has just become president for life. Well, there's something that we call that in first world democracies. We call that an authoritarian dictatorship. That's what it actually is, okay? So they have this crazy social credit score system. Hello, has anybody seen Black Mirror in that episode, right? That is a dystopian show about
this is like the theme of almost every like dystopian futuristic movie.
And China's literally building that right now. It's already built. They're just scaling it out even more. It's been built for years. In 2018, I saw a story in late 2018 where they were already shipping off the people with the lowest credit scores into essentially slave labor camps, where then they can't get out. And it's really sad. It's really unfortunate. And unfortunately, most people don't know about it. And unfortunately, the whole problem is there's going to be certain people watching this right now. And they'll be like, oh, Brent's racist against the Chinese or something like this, or he's a Trump supporter because whatever. Like, no, I'm just like stating facts, and I'm just stating how I feel.
No shame in being a Trump supporter, y'all.
I try not to support any like individual political figure. I try to support ideas. I think that that's way more important. That way I can attach to the ideas of Trump that I like and detach from the ideas of Trump that I dislike. And so there's many, many things about Trump that I like and that I don't like. And I don't support Trump like individually as a person because he's done some pretty atrocious things. And he's a pretty blatant liar. But guess what? They are all liars. Obama lies. George Bush lied. President, before that, Bill Clinton lied. Every single politician, they lie. I mean, the whole system is set up like for them to lie. They get away with it. Politics is a zero-sum game. Wealth creation is a positive-sum game. That's why I want to play the wealth creation game and not the politics game,
Absolutely. So there's a few questions. One person's asking if I'm a atheist. I pretty much have a weird conception of God, as you guys could tell. I mean, when I still can't. You can never claim to be an atheist. I don't think a person who really believes truly in the simulation theory can honestly just call themselves an atheist. It seems too non-atheist. It's just opens such a can of worms to believe in the simulation theory. So I'll stick with agnostic theist at this point for myself. I feel comfortable with that.
Here's one thing that we can say: no matter what title any person gives themselves about their religious beliefs, one thing that hopefully all reasonable people can agree upon is that we don't know. We're in this crazy reality. We don't know. I've watched every single one of George Carlin's 18 HBO stand-up specials. I've watched almost every single video of George Carlin I could find on YouTube over the years. I mean, I remember back in like 2009 finding incredible YouTube content of George Carlin and thinking, how does this have 17,000 views only? This should have millions of views. And now, of course, it does have multi-millions of views in the year 2020. But that man was a freaking genius on so many different levels. Just if you want to get smarter, just watch every single George Carlin stand-up ever. And, one thing that he talked about quite a bit is that there's no way that we can know all this stuff, like that's what I like the Zeitgeist movie in the part with religion when he had the George Carlin audio with that little cartoon there. He's like, God's all powerful, all knowing, omnipotent. He knows everything about everybody, everything there ever was, but he's broke. He needs money. He needs more money because every time you go into church, where they need more money, right?
Right.
Donate money. We're here to tell you God's words, and we know what God's words are, but we need some money. Well, if you're so powerful and like knowledgeable, then why do you need money?
Right.
And it's just ridiculous. Like there's no way that we can know this stuff. I say have your own ideas, call yourself whatever you want, it doesn't really matter. Like, let's get to work and focus on science and longevity.
Exactly. I'm just curious, like when you did study all the religions, um, did you did one did if you had to say if one was like more likely to be true than the others, if you had to say of all of the ones you studied, which would be like the most likely, or which religion do you vibe with the most as far as its
Okay,
philosophies or concepts,
that's a better.
or maybe both of those?
Well, I'll go with the second one because the first one, the answer is none. I mean, none of them are fully true. They all religions have some type of truths to them, or else people wouldn't be following them, right? There's some type of things that jive with them that make sense.
Mm-hmm.
There's kernels of truth here and there. I took a Asian philosophy or Eastern philosophy course sophomore year of college, and I thought that was pretty interesting. I'd kind of heard of those concepts, but I studied them, quite a bit for a whole semester, and just learning about Buddhism and kind of how they think, and I definitely jive more with that personally. But there's lots of things that can be learned from a lot of them. One thing a lot of people who haven't studied religion much probably don't realize is that the Judeo-Christian religions are all like pretty similar. Judaism and Christianity are actually pretty similar, and they both kind of stemmed from Egyptology, which is something like a lot of people don't realize. But that was pointed out in Zeitgeist quite a bit. I have seen people retorting the Zeitgeist religious part of the movie in YouTube videos, and they make a lot of valid points, as well about that. I'm not saying everything in Zeitgeist was true, but they made some interesting points and stuff, with this Jesus figure. I mean, personally, there's no proof that Jesus ever existed, and if I had a gun to my head, my best guess would be that he never like really walked the earth, that he was a character that was created. And it's a great character. I mean, I've learned a lot of really wise things from this character, Jesus. I think that he's a phenomenal character. We all have a lot to learn from him. I mean, his message is basically like unconditional love,
Right.
love thy neighbor, all this stuff. And it's kind of funny that so
message.
many people who call themselves Christians, they don't seem very Christ-like, And if you want some good humor on that, type into YouTube Bill Hicks, one of the greatest comedians of all time. He crushed it throughout the 1980s, and he talked about these things and has some incredible humor. He was like, could you imagine if Jesus came back? And he was like, hey guys, the hell you guys wearing this cross around everybody's neck? Didn't you fucking know they strapped me to that thing and killed me?
Right,
on
and
that.
you posted that meme about that Jesus is like, what the heck? Like, why are you calling the day I died Good Friday? Right?
Right. Yeah, I posted that to my story on Facebook and Instagram on Friday. Yeah, just a few days ago on Good Friday. It's Jesus, and he's like, "Hello, my people. What do you call this day that I was crucified?" And then one guy's like, "We call it Good Friday," and another guy's like, "Yeah, we call it Good Friday." And Jesus is like, "What the fuck? Good Friday. This is the day I was crucified. This is the day that I went through like the most pain and suffering." And of course, some real Christian person will come in and be like, "Oh, well, you don't understand this and that." It's like, man, can't you just take a joke? Like, it's a silly thing that we call it Good Friday. You see how language and things evolve over time, right?
Yeah.
It's interesting that the shortest day of the year by sunlight, that's what I mean by, of course, I don't mean time, I mean by the shortest amount of sunlight in the year is December 22nd. And then we celebrate Christmas, the day of Christ's birth, even though all the historians, the religious historians, tell us that Christ was actually probably born in April. It's agreed upon that he was most likely not born on Christmas Day, December 25th, but December 22nd, the day that we have the least amount of sunlight, December 25th, the day we celebrate Christ's birth. Christ died, was dead for 3 days, and then risen 3 days later, resurrected. Do you see?
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
watched I watched part of the Zeitgeist, and it was like saying it's all like planetary stuff, right? Based on
Right.
the sun and everything. Yeah. That's
Right.
actually what caused that. Watching that documentary was actually what caused my mom to lose her faith in God.
Oh,
and
wow.
like the whole thing. Yeah, she totally lost it at that point. That really got to her.
And by
Um,
the way, I'm not saying those things are true. I'm just saying it's things that make you go, that's interesting. Is that
yes.
just a coincidence? I don't really believe in coincidences. But yeah, I mean, hopefully your mom is now a better person for it, and it's something that it's unfortunate that somebody. I met your mom on Skype a few days ago. I had the pleasure of meeting her. Really, really nice lady, I could tell. And that movie came out maybe 12 years ago, so it's unfortunate that like she had to go her whole life, and then before she came across those ideas. I feel incredibly fortunate that I grew up kind of with the internet. I can't imagine how intelligent my son's going to be because I'm not teaching him any of this crap. I'm
Right.
teaching him real things. If you want to look at people like Sergey Brin, Larry Page, Mark Zuckerberg, some of the wealthiest people on the planet who have had massive impact on our lives, all these tools that we're using, they built these companies and these tools that we're using. Sergey Brin's parents were computer scientists. I mean, he grew up working on computers. I mean, people are worried about kids and their iPads and devices and this and that. Yeah, I'm worried about that to a certain extent. Too much of anything is bad, as we already kind of talked about on this live stream. But for the most part, I'm not worried about the kids in the future. I'm worried about now and how dumb people are right now.
Right.
When people say I'm worried about artificial intelligence, I say I'm worried about human stupidity. That's what I'm worried about. And it's rampant right now. Just go watch the movie Idiocracy and then realize that that's could turn out to be a documentary. Let's change things. 40% of Americans can't come up with $400 at the end of the month. Like, that's very dangerous right now in these times. That's why the government, the Federal Reserve, and the United States government know they have to give all this money to people or the whole economy would fall apart. Like, that's not how things are supposed to work.
Yeah. I think, like, the idea of the heaven on earth, that's an idea. I think this is kind of where religions and our movement can merge, because I think everyone should at least get behind that idea. It's like every transhumanist believes in wanting to have a heaven on earth. Pretty much every person on earth wants that. Like, to have a utopian place on earth where we've cured all diseases. And even for these people who believe in an afterlife or whatever, why not create it right now? Why not create it here? Because you don't even know your afterlife exists, but it's like, we have all this suffering. Let's just improve the condition of the human race. And I think that's where hopefully everyone should get on board. That seems like that's the most basic thing ever, right?
Totally. I mean, we're never going to have utopia, but we should always be striving to improve. And, the only thing that actually improves our life is technology, right? So I'm not saying that social relationships, friendships, things like that aren't great and don't add value. They do. But the way that you get more value out of those things for longer is through technology. Perfect example, Rowan, you are about a 25-minute drive from me right now in Sacramento. I'm in Folsom. Doesn't matter if you were on the other side of the planet in Russia, like I, Skype with Vlad all the time. We're able to improve our communication and our relationship due to technology. So don't confuse those things. The only thing that is, basically improving us from slinging shit at each other, pooping in our hands and throwing at each other like stupid apes is technology. It's that one word. So we just need more technology. We need more science. We need to just become a science-based species. We need to move past religious dogma, and we need to move forward. I mean, it's not.
It's kind of ironic though, because at the same time you're creating all this science and this techno-utopia, and I've heard other transhumanists make this correlation as well. It's almost like you're creating God, because the more technology you have, it's like all the fulfillments of God then become real. If you have this technological AI, let's say you create this super intelligence, and then it becomes God. So you created the God, and then the God traps you in a matrix, and it's this loop, and it's like, what the heck's going on? So we could be literally creating the God that everyone's talking about. Let's say it doesn't exist. Let's say there's no God. We're literally, by being transhumanists and progressing technology and AI development, we're creating the God,
Yeah, we're becoming more godlike, that's for sure. These characteristics that we attribute and have kind of our ancestors have written about as godlike. We're definitely creating more of those features as we kind of discussed in this live stream. But that's the thing that I've learned about reality is that like the more that you know, the more you know how much you don't know. And I'm pretty like humbled by that. And I think that most people should take more of that approach and think about it because yeah, I know my iPhone is going to be smaller, faster. Actually, they've got it at a good size now, so it's going to be, you know, faster, hopefully cheaper, but that depends on Apple's business model and how that goes. But it's definitely going to be faster. It's going to have more storage. It's going to have improved features for the most part. You know, there could be some software updates that have glitches and that kind of, you know, sometimes you have to walk 2 step forward or 2 step back or 1 step backwards to walk 2 step forwards, right? Sometimes you have to go backwards to go forwards. And that happens in technology sometimes. But for the ultimate, like reason, ultimately it's going forward. And so, yeah, we're going to be moving more and more to these godlike type technologies and features in society. But humans are complacent and humans are very, very adaptable. That's one thing that I've learned about humans more than any other species. We are the most adaptable species, adaptable to our environment than any other species. And what I mean by that is, could you imagine your life right now without a smartphone? Like it was just, it's 2020 right now. It was just 12 years ago or so before most people had never, like the iPhone came out in 2007, 13 years ago. Yeah, we had some Palm Pilots and Blackberries and stuff before that, but that wasn't the same. And like we remember that life. My son is going to grow up in a crazy world. Like I can't even, can you imagine the world that little Alton is going to be growing up in right now?
Yeah, it's gonna be freaking wow. I can't even imagine like.
I mean, he's growing up in COVID-19 right now where we're not even leaving the
Right.
house much, but yet he's met like all my family. He's met my cousins in Israel because of like Skype and Zoom and stuff. We just did Easter Sunday yesterday with my wife's family on a Zoom call with like 16 people on there all over different places. You know, I mean, it's a very, these are things like I
He's gonna
remember
have a
the
hard time not getting addicted to the video games because the video games now are
oh,
so much better than
this
I
is
was
where
addicted to
this is
video
where
games.
parenting this is where
Right,
parenting comes
right,
in,
of
real.
course.
That's why we have to be aware of those things and be good parents. But yeah, I mean, I remember that movie Demolition Man when I was a kid with Sandra Bullock and Wesley Snipes and Sylvester Stallone. Remember? That was in the early '90s, and I thought it was so cool. It was like in the future, and Sandra Bullock was doing video conferencing, like as the phone call, like in her apartment on a big screen. And I just remember thinking like, and talking with my friends when I was like, I don't know, 9 years old or something. Like, do you think that's really going to happen? Like in 2050 or whenever that movie took place, they were like, no. They're like, there's no way. It's just a movie. And some were like, yeah, I think so. Here it is 2020. And like, we just take this stuff for granted. Dude, we're live streaming on YouTube right now. And then it's going to be on YouTube essentially forever. You know, as long as you don't have any problems with your account and nothing crazy happens to YouTube, it's going to be on YouTube essentially like indefinitely.
Yeah.
That's kind of crazy to even like I don't even think any of us fully grasp, you know, what that really means. Even long after you and I might biologically die, and I hate to even talk like that because I don't want us to, but you know, we might all live on digitally as our own files, but biologically we could die. But I like the Woody Allen quote on this one, right? Said I want to live on in my apartment,
Right.
not my
Not the
work.
minds of my country, man. He doesn't care about the legacy. I don't either, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
So, you want to look at some of these questions? We got a question.
yeah.
One question is, don't you think that religion is slowing down our dream for eternal life? Do you think it is? It could be, because religion, it offers people the hope of the afterlife, not just the hope. It gives people this impression that they're certainly going to get it. They're certainly going to go to heaven. And then if they're so certain they're going to get to heaven and paradise, they're not going to be really caring much about curing aging, are they? They're not going to be caring. In fact, they're going to want to age and die. They're not going to have the guts to kill themselves, so they almost want nature to kill them. To kill them, they want aging to kill them so they can go to heaven. A lot of these people.
Yeah, I'd say not even just religion, just any non-scientific ideas are not good, and they're not helping you as an individual if you have those thoughts and those beliefs, and they're not helping our society. And religion is not a scientific, concept.
Right.
It is faith-based, and it's based off a lot of lies and things that are made up, and and I'm all for compassion. There's good things about religion. There are. It's just that I don't think that you need to be religious to do good things. Just because there are people and things that are done that are positive in religious institutions doesn't mean that we should then all want to become religious. No, I think this is something that people don't fully understand. They think that morality comes out of religion. It's like, no. You can be a moral person, and then from there you could also be religious. But I can be a moral person. I consider myself to be moral. I have my own kind of beliefs about what morality is and how to be moral. See, I care about what I do when nobody's looking, because I care about what I think. And that's how you build self-esteem. That's how you build self-worth. Because it doesn't matter what other people think about me. I'll always know. I always know the truth. If I lied to somebody, or if I misrepresented myself in some way to get something or something, I don't want to do that. I won't sleep well. I won't feel good about myself. That's what then builds anxiety, because your brain knows, right? So if you want to fix anxiety, now here's, psychiatrist Brent here, I totally believe more the Tom Cruise stuff there, even though I think he's a crazy Scientologist in certain ways. And I actually don't think that he is really a Scientologist. I think it's a big scam that he's done to make money and stuff. But I think that, he's right in that sense about the anxiety stuff, which is that think about the root cause of everything, right? Why? Just ask yourself, why do you have anxiety? Well, right. I have anxiety because I'm worried about this. Well, why are you worried about that? Well, I'm worried about this because of this. Well, why did that happen? If you just keep going down the rabbit hole, it's probably because you misrepresented yourself to somebody or yourself. And now you're trying to...
You have guilt, right?
Guilt
for something.
Why do you have that guilt, right? It's because of something you're not feeling good about yourself,
right.
Some kind of action you did, thought that you had, belief that you had, wishing you could have done it better, thinking that you're living this lie and you're trying to cover up for it in the future, so it's building more anxiety. Just be true to yourself, right? And how do you be true to yourself? Be data-driven, be science-based, right? Don't lie. Try to be as truthful as possible. And listen, these things are difficult to do because our globe, the planet we live on, is so crazy and messed up. Hello, has anybody been paying attention to how this world works? It's crazy. Politics, mainstream media, corruption. It's out of control. And I just go back to the Einstein quote. He said something along the lines of, the most important decision you'll ever make is whether this world is a scary, horrible place or a loving, caring place, because you can find ample evidence for either. It's all confirmation bias. And now that we have the internet, you can go looking for whatever you want. You're a Trump supporter, you're going to start curating all of your social media and internet and your neural network to go on the internet and search for things, and Google's going to know you more, and it's going to keep feeding you more stuff that tells you Trump's great. If you hate Trump, it's going to go the opposite. You're going to build a whole social network of people and stuff, and news, media, television programming telling you he's horrible, right? We need to try and stay in reality and focus on truth. And social media is great for certain things. It's not very good at that. In some ways it is, but in some ways it's really horrible. And I think it's really divisive to people in many ways. And that's why we're in these very strange times right now where, you can talk to your elderly people and your grandparents and our parents. Things were not this divisive this long, and they don't seem to be changing at all, right? Maybe this weird COVID-19 is something that's brought the whole world together. Maybe that's a positive, but I don't know. I just ranted a lot. Is anything there making sense, Rowan?
No, heck yes. Especially, that's but everything, especially the stuff about the conscience, basically saying following your conscience, because I've often like said things like I've often thought that karma, with or without God, there's like a karma built into the universe just based on us having a conscience, an inner monologue, and we have to live with ourselves, like you were saying, and we hold ourselves accountable. We can't lie to ourselves, and so people who do anything immoral, they're ultimately, I think, going to build a kind of self-hatred for themselves. It's going to impede their ability to love themselves. When you do bad
Right.
things, you can't love yourself. When you don't love yourself, guess what happens? Your actions start to reflect that lack of love for yourself, and you start doing all kind of self-destructive behaviors. You self-destruct because you don't love yourself, because you hate yourself, because you're guilty for all these immoral things you're doing. So there's like a karmic system built into the universe. It's kind of amazing, really.
If you don't, yeah, I completely agree with everything you said. And if you don't love yourself, then good luck loving other people, right? You need
Yes.
to, we're not talking about narcissism. We're talking about loving yourself, kind of that oxygen mask analogy from before about being on the plane. Take care of yourself first so that you can take care of other people. And the way you take care of yourself is by loving yourself, treating yourself, your body, your mind, your spirit. I don't necessarily believe in a spirit, but you know what I mean? The concept of it. Treating yourself good, that way you can treat other people good as well. And yeah, these things are super important, and I just feel like people are just off watching the Kardashians or something, or just lost. Like, I actually, about a week ago, my wife and she was on Hulu, and we just checked out the Kardashians for like all of like 17 seconds just to kind of see what it was. I mean, this is just mind-numbing nonsense. And these women like Kim Kardashian and Khloe, they don't even look like we actually did an experiment. The new, what are they in, season 17 or whatever, I don't know, 13. We went back to season 1, episode 1. I mean, they actually looked like real, like beautiful girls at that point, like women. Now they look like these fake, weird things like out of a sci-fi movie or something. Their lipstick's fake. They've had all this plastic surgery. Their hair's fake. Everything's fake, fake, fake. I'm sorry, like, I am not attracted to Kim Kardashian. I know that might sound really crazy to people.
Not
It's
crazy to me.
attractive.
I'm 100% agree.
She looks fucking weird, man. They
Yeah.
all do. And the way that they do these poses and these faces to kind of lure you in, I mean, the best way I can describe it is like a magic trick where when you know how the magic trick works, it's not a trick anymore. It's like you can see through it. It's like the man behind the curtain. And I totally see through these fake women and the way that they are destroying our culture with all this fakeness. And that might sound weird coming from like a transhumanist or a science. Like aesthetically, I want people to be young and biologically young and healthy as much as they can. And they are doing an aspect of that. Like Kim Kardashian and the other girls, they are like looking good in that sense. But all the fake makeup and the plastic surgery and all of this other hair extensions and stuff, like, don't get me wrong, I'm a voluntarist. Do whatever you want. I don't care. They can do whatever they want. I'm just saying, to me, who like, I don't spend my time in this world and I jump in that world for 17 seconds, I'm like, this is just weird. I don't know. Maybe I'm just like out of touch at
That's
this point.
100% true. And what you're
It's
saying,
just
and,
weird,
and they're
right?
gonna distort other women's version of beauty. Like women's identity is gonna be, they're gonna be comparing themselves to. Imagine like a little girl like reading through some fashion magazine, and she's looking at pictures of, Khloe Kardashian and Kim Kardashian, and she's gonna get it in her head that this is how she needs to look, and it's gonna distort their version of beauty, and it's awful. It really is.
Rowan, we actually like basically studied that very concept in some of my communications courses in college, and it goes back to like even the beginning of just newspapers, like, and how that changed, because before most people couldn't even read, for most of human history. And then once people could read, they started getting educated. And the elite didn't like this for the most part, because then once you're educated, you become harder to control, right? My dog figures out, certain things, then I gotta, if my dog figures out how to get into the treat bin, I gotta move the treat bin. I don't want her having all the treats,
Right.
And so in the same concept, as our human civilization has evolved.
That's also why they didn't let the slaves like read. They were trying to keep the slaves away from reading books and stuff, right?
That way they can continue to propagate the lie that they're like genetically inferior and they're dumb yeah, it's the chicken and the egg problem. So essentially, like what I'm basically getting at, I'll try and make it as succinct as possible, is that this is a new thing that's been progressing now all the way to where we are in 2020 with social media now, where even celebrity is getting broken down. I mean, if you and I and the rest of longevity enthusiasts are successful, there's no reason why at some point we can't be like super famous and wealthy. It's not something like I do want those things, but I only want them to just keep dumping more resources back into longevity science. And my point is, like, if they work hard enough, not anybody. I mean, my wife's 95-year-old grandmother is not going to be a successful social media influencer, most likely, right? Mm-hmm. But my general point is, like, people growing up in this new world, if you put your mind to it, you can accomplish amazing things that would surprise you. And focus on the long-term things that matter the most. Focus on the things that are probably not going to get taken over by AI. That's what you want to be spending your time doing. And sales, marketing, doing anything that's building on the internet, like YouTube, all these powerful social media platforms, build on those, and you're just building like things that can actually not only like sustain themselves, but have network effects and continue to become more and more valuable,
Absolutely. Well said. Yeah. Priorities. Like, prioritize what matters. Like, freak. Let's look at some of the questions. Let's look at the chat, maybe.
Yeah, it looks like they've stopped, but there were tons of questions in there for a while.
I'll start. Just see if you can find any, if there's any at all.
Yeah, okay. Somebody said at 8:20, so like almost 2 hours ago, did you go to both church and synagogue? Yes, I went to church sometimes on Sundays, not every Sunday. Definitely like the big ones like Easter and Christmas. And then we go to church on Fridays. We went to synagogue on Friday nights. Not every Friday night, but yeah, we go to both. And so from a very young age, this is why, like, I'm not joking, like at 4 or 5 years old, as soon as I could speak language, I could hear the priest say one thing at church on Sunday, like, this is the word of God. Like, he would basically say, this is how it is. This is not negotiable. You must believe in this, right? That type of language. And then I go to synagogue on Friday night, and basically my rabbi would say something very different, And again, this is very easy to understand and interpret, even for a 5-year-old. And I could immediately.
They can't both be right.
It was great, yeah. So my brother was 2 years older than me, and then my sister was born when I was about 5. But even when I was 5, my brother was 7. I'd ask my brother, like, "Hey, what about this? These sound like these are, conflicting statements." My brother's like, "Yeah." So we both figured out this is all a bunch of bullshit from like a very young age, and we couldn't really tell my parents because we still wanted the gifts, at Hanukkah and Christmas and stuff. And yes, we got gifts for both, and we also didn't want to upset my parents. And also, there's that whole power structure of being a kid. But yeah, I figured this out at a very young age, and I also figured out that aging sucked at a very young age too. I just didn't really think that there was anything that you could do about it or anything that I could do about it until I got a little bit older, until I was about 20 and started reading books like The Singularity is Near. I read Ending Aging by Albert Gray. I think I read that in 2008, a year after it came out. And then started watching tons of their lectures on YouTube as YouTube started coming about. And I mean, there's a very good chance that I've watched more interviews and more YouTube videos of Ray Kurzweil and Aubrey de Grey than any other person on this planet. And I know that might sound crazy, but like, you have no idea how many interviews and videos I've watched of both of those dudes. So I can pretty much repeat like tons of things that they know, and their beliefs and their basically like their beliefs and their motivations, because I've just watched so much of their content over the years.
Right. When you were a kid, did you have a different relationship with the fear of death to now? Did it change at all? When you first learned about death to now, did anything change? Because a lot of people, their ideas and beliefs as a kid impacts their perception of death, and it changes a lot as they grow older, right? So did yours change at all?
Yeah, it definitely has. Now, the fear of death for me is super real. My body's degrading. I've been balding for like 10 years. It sucks. I want to try and reverse it. if you ever see me reverse my balding, it's not going to be from hair transplant. It's going to be from actually like regrowing it, which I might hopefully try and be able to do with exosomes soon. I'm just focused building things, with like you guys and other people like with Vladimir and stuff. But I needed to find the time to do that. But yeah, when I was young, I basically thought I was essentially invincible. Like I knew that death was something that was real, but it was just so far off, and I was just so young and youthful that I just never really seriously thought about it like happening to me. I mean, I did a little bit, but like I was always kind of had this thought of like look at this right here. This is a picture of me with my dog when I was like 19 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so look at that person there, like super youthful, all that. Like, so when I was that age, that's maybe like that was 1920. That's when I kind of started thinking like, oh, I'm gonna get older. And you know what? Science has figured out that the human brain doesn't fully become an adult until it's like 25 years old. They've done all these psychological studies and brain scanning and stuff. And I mean, we are basically way dumber than we ever thought until we're about 25. And so I've become way more mature over the last, I'm 35 right now, over the last 10 years, emotionally intelligent. I've read tons of books, just researched like crazy on the internet how reality works. And by doing that, yeah, I'm scared of death, but it's that scaredness is motivation for me. And it's really sad. Some people in our community, like Haley Harrison, I really like her. I've spent time doing private Zoom calls with her. She is really like, she has the disease. She is scared of death to the point where it is affecting her cognition, her mental abilities in a negative way. And I've really tried to help her, overcome that, because then to me, aging's winning. And I'm a stubborn son of a bitch, man. I want to win. I don't want aging to win, And so if you're waking up every day and you're scared of aging and it's like it's hurting you, not motivating you to do better things, then you're already letting it win, And
so
and
true.
I'm not going to let it win. That's why I want our whole phrase to be defeat death or die trying. Like if I'm on my deathbed, I just want to know that what, I fucking tried, man. As soon as I figured this shit out and figured out like that death is the enemy and that aging is the enemy, I did everything within my power, minus here or there, maybe taking a couple days off to go to the lake house with the wife to kind of, stress management is really important. I'm still going to go on vacations. I have a wife that I love deeply. She's not as crazy about this stuff as I am, so to a certain extent, but I'm working my ass off to try and really do this. And I've seen some good progress, and I think that we're really making connections with some incredible people, and I think it's just the beginning,
That's a very good point you mentioned, and I'm glad you're helping Haley with that, because that's, I've known Haley for a long time, and we've talked about this stuff. And it's so true that, fear can destroy you or it can motivate you. I've always promoted fear. I say, like, fear is my superpower, but, like, it comes down to what do you mean by fear? Because when I'm talking about fear, I'm talking about the motivational type of fear. Because there is a paralyzing, destructive fear. You can just be trembling, and it's not effective for anything. It doesn't move you forward. It doesn't motivate you to get up every day and fight the fight. It's about the fear can be harnessed like a fuel, like a superpower, and but you got to know how to do it. It's very tricky.
Now Haley's on Facebook all the time, and she, reads and follows the longevity science and all the news very well, and she's very active in that sense. And she sends me messages on Facebook of some good stuff. I keep up with a lot of this stuff from her messages she sends me. I think she's a great person. I just want her to not be so stressed out about fear, because there's the parasympathetic and the sympathetic, right? There's flight or fight, and there's rest or digest. And I'm just afraid that if she is genuinely like worried and fearful about aging, like basically every waking moment, and even when she's sleeping, this seems to like really be like something that she's really, really scared of, not just when I message with her, but when I actually do video conference with her, I can really tell that she's like scared of aging. because she's lost both her parents to aging. And I think that that's just like putting her in a fight or flight, constant state of biology. And when you're in fight or flight,
It's raising the
you
cortisol
cannot
levels,
be
right? The stress
right.
hormones.
You cannot be in rest and digest. You cannot be healing and recovering and thriving, essentially, when you're constantly in fight or flight. And that's what I'm just concerned about her and anybody else who kind of like, suffers from that mindset. So for me, no, aging doesn't like freak me out like that on a daily basis. It's something that I kind of like think about, and I'm like, I don't want that to happen. I'm just very pragmatic about it, and that's the word that I use with Haley. I was like, hey, just be more pragmatic about that. Like think about, I don't want this to happen. Well, how can I stop this from happening? I'll try to just use everything I know about science to stop it. And if it doesn't work out, then hey, I tried my best. Even if Rowan, we're already doing better than like most people ever in history right now. Most people, I'm 35. Most people, I think, were dead by the time they were 35 throughout all of human history. And
That's
a
so
lot of
sad.
that, a lot of people don't realize that the numbers are skewed from child mortality rates. Like we have dramatically improved child mortality rates within the last 100 years. So first of all, we all basically won the lottery because every single sperm, that comes out is like 100 million. You won. You already won the lottery by being that sperm that hit the egg. Guess what? That's you. If you're here, you were that sperm that went the fastest or got there and won the race. Then after that, like for any of us to be here, conscious, listening to this, part of reality, you have already overcome insane, unfathomable odds to be here. And so why not just keep beating the odds? Why not just keep chipping away at this and inspiring people to actually do something that matters rather than like worshiping the Kardashians or something,
So true, so true. We really are really lucky just to be alive. I often just try to remind people of that. Just to be alive. Think about all the people that died today from aging and every other cause. We have a chance as long as we're still alive. We just keep on. A lot of people get wrapped up with all their sufferings and all their different problems in their life. But I think you always talk about doing things the long game. I think we should approach our happiness with also be inspired and hopeful that if you just wait long enough and live long enough, if you live forever, happiness is eventually going to come to you. It's eventually going to find you. All the things you feel like you're lacking in your life and everything. In 100 years, 200 years, 1,000 years, eventually, if you're just alive at that point still, you're probably going to find those things. You're going to eventually do that amazing job you wanted to do, or that you wanted to be an actor or a singer, or you wanted to find
Right.
eternal love and you're just lonely or whatever. Eventually you'll find whatever it is you're looking for and you'll be happy. Just stay alive. Simplify it. Just stay alive.
Well, I know what you mean, Rowan, and I generally agree with that. But that word happiness is another one of those subjective words like, evil, love, hell, God, heaven. It means something different to everybody. So I really recommend a book called Stumbling on Happiness. It's a book written by a Harvard psychologist. I read it back in like 2010. There's also a documentary series that was on Netflix back then. I don't think it is anymore. You can probably find it on the internet. But it's phenomenal because he actually defines what happiness is, according to his, clinical scientific definitions, and then talks about like the science of happiness and kind of how to create it. And then there's other like really smart people that I follow, like Tom Bilyeu. It's like, no, you don't want to be happy. What you want is better brain chemistry. And how do you get better brain chemistry? You do that by gaining skills. You gain valuable skills that people want and value. And you do that by having, good self-talk to yourself, loving self-talk, growth mindset. And you just keep on improving and iterating and networking with people and just gaining certain things that people basically want, right? And so look at today right now. It is April 13th, 2020. We are in California. It was 75 degrees and sunny outside. I walked with my wife and my 4-year-old son and my beautiful little dog around the park. today, and it was so beautiful. Vitamin D, like life is great. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. And we're on Skype right now, live streaming on YouTube. I mean, it doesn't matter how wealthy you were 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago. You know, you could not have done any of the things that we're doing today. And so, no, I'm not like running any countries or massive corporations or the king of this or that, but I would take my life right now or any first world country person's life right now over any like 16th century king, you know, because that person didn't have all the technologies and the lifestyle that we have. They had some good shit. They probably had really good food that wasn't all GMO'd and destroyed with pesticides and herbicides and all sorts of other things. But they didn't have good healthcare like we did. They didn't have the knowledge that we did. They didn't have the internet. They didn't have the
transportation. Couldn't go to the
transportation.
store and just buy a jar of peanut butter.
Right. They couldn't get their crunchy peanut butter or their creamy peanut butter. There's so many things that we have, and like I really, Rowan, you watched the Roger Ver interview. I was so like appreciative of him to do that with me, and he said that we'll do a third. You know, I hope to continue to build a relationship with him and see if we can get him more and more involved in longevity. And he's a very wealthy person, and he's very generous with donations for things that matter to him, and longevity matters to him. So, you know, one thing that Roger talks about quite a bit is that economy is this word that so many people wrap up and they immediately think money. Economy, money. Economy, money. Like they're synonymous. That's how our culture is. Whereas like Zeitgeist point this out, and Jacques Fresco, I met Jacques Fresco. It's on my YouTube channel, my whole tour of the Venus Project. You know, he was creating the resource-based economy was his idea, and he kind of took that from other smart people, and then Peter Joseph took that, and it kind of lives on today through Roxanne Meadows and Peter Joseph and other people. But the whole point is that money is a tool that's supposed to improve our life, and in many ways right now it's like hindering us because it's being controlled by these elite governments, and it's just allowing them to carry out their agendas, and they can inflate the money supply, as we already talked about. And what a good economy really is, it's about the intelligent management of vital resources. That's what matters, you know. Skype doesn't matter much anymore when you don't have food, when you don't have a roof over your head. You're not worried about Skype as much and YouTube streaming. And, you know, we just want to make sure that we're improving on the actual things that really matter for the economy and not worried as much about money. You know, I have plenty of money for now, and I'm stumbling on happiness in that book, and Oprah picked up that book and started talking to her audience about it around 2010 or so. They talked about, they ran a study that for a family of 4 in America, after about, I think it was $70,000, so we'll adjust that for inflation now 10 years later, and maybe even more after this $2.2 trillion of Federal Reserve creation of money. So we'll say maybe after about $100,000 today, maybe even more, for a family of 4 in America, it cuts off your level of happiness. There's no more happiness after that. Okay, once your basic needs are met, then the happiness baseline is gone. Then it's like up to you as the individual. Okay, so there's tons of billionaires out there who are not happy. You know, they're stressed out, they hate life, they die young of horrible diseases and things. You know, when I say young, I mean in their 50s or 60s or stuff, where if they were to just chill out a little bit, maybe donate some of that money or like most all of it to aging research, like Bill Falloon tries to shame these billionaires into, then maybe they could be a little bit more happy. But they get caught up in playing the money game and the status game, and it's to their own detriment, you know. And it's really fascinating to me because balance, you know, is really the key here. And that's, I learned that from kind of like the Eastern philosophy, Asian, more religious type spiritual mindsets.
Right, the yin yang, they're all about the balance.
Exactly. And so that's how I try to like think and live my life with those type of principles, because I always tell myself, man, if I'm not happy, like what the hell am I doing? And am I working my ass off right now every day today, like doing these interviews and learning how to YouTube and stuff because I'm still not great at it, as you know. I mean, I was recording in 720p for my Roger Ver interview yesterday morning. I thought I had a 4K webcam. I thought I was cool. Like, how dumb was I, right? But you learn and you move on, right? You can't let those things beat you up, or you're just falling into the trap, right? It's all about having a growth mindset and learning. Don't make the same mistake twice or three or four times. That's the definition of insanity, right? Making the same mistake over and over and over again and expecting a different result. So let's not be insane. Let's be sane. Let's work together to get smarter. That is really the key that I'm trying to focus on, right?
Heck yeah. Yeah, that interview with Roger Ver was really, really good.
Thanks,
I mean,
man.
I especially liked the parts about like freedom and stuff, and how like this COVID-19 thing is just like totally just trashing on our freedoms. It's like, and there was a meme I showed in my live stream about the coronavirus, and I had a bunch of memes. One of them was like, I'm not sure what I'm more afraid of, the coronavirus or the facts that we're losing like a lot of our freedom because of the reaction to the coronavirus, and like I'm not sure what's worse, So it's like that's an important point, I think, a very important point in your interview.
Thank you, Rowan. I appreciate it. And let me give you an example of why I do my show notes and how powerful they can be. So I didn't get a chance to even say this during my interview with Roger Ver, but what I plugged into the show notes on that area right there is a link to George Carlin's stand-up about rights, okay?
Oh, I clicked that. Yeah, I clicked
okay,
it.
Cool. I even put a card in there too. I normally only put cards on my YouTube interviews for my own videos. This time, I did it for that George Carlin video because it deserves it. And what George Carlin says there is that you have no rights. And if I can bring out my George Carlin voice, let me. It's like, you have no rights. You know what you have? Temporary privileges. Rights are not rights if they can just be taken away. You have temporary privileges. And that's something that we are all being reminded of right now. Okay, the right to free speech in America, written into the Constitution, the right to freely assemble, written into the Constitution. All these rights, well, guess what? They are not rights. Say what you want about Trump. I know you're a supporter of his. Again, I support many things about it. They just threw the Constitution right out the window right now. Okay, what we have are temporary privileges, and don't ever forget it, okay? But here's one thing that Roger, I think, said in that interview that I did with him, which is super important that I want people to think about. Rights do not come from governments, okay? They do not come from other people. They don't come from your rulers, your kings, your governments, your dictators, whatever. Your rights are inalienable and they come from you. You get the rights. They're given to you by reality, and you have to take them and stand up for them, or they'll be taken from you. And you have to do this in a strategic way, right? Or if you overplay your cards in life, like some people do, then those rights will soon realize that they're not rights. They're temporary privileges. And that has to do with everything. It has to do with relationships. It has to do with money. It has to do with power, respect, everything. And so that's it. It's pretty deep what I just said if you understand like the gravity of that. But you just have to understand the game theory how everything plays out. And I think a lot of people just were not prepared for what's actually been happening the last few weeks and in this country and the whole planet. And I think everybody's gotten a real reminder here of who actually runs the show. It's governments and central banks. Central banks basically run the whole planet, and most people have no idea who they are, what their agenda is, and how they operate. And these are the true rulers of the planet. They're the ones that control the money supply. They're the ones that control the entire economy. And a lot of us are just basically puppets, and they're the puppet masters. And now we're really kind of seeing this play out,
Yeah.
Does that make sense at all?
Yes, it does. I like, and I follow a lot of conspiracy like stuff, and the conspiracy people are always talking about like who's running the world. There's a lot of different theories, and people throw out different things, and like the Illuminati or the bunch of different people, right? People, but it's like this is another theory And this seems to be more probably backed up, I guess. You know, you could probably trace it back and it seems pretty legit.
Yeah, I mean, if so, my background is when I graduated college in 2007, I was a mortgage broker, banker for about a year as the whole global economy was like imploding, to 2008 from mortgage brokers. So I was like in this environment. My first job out of college had about 250 employees or so, and in like 2007 after I graduated. A year later, in June 2008, when I left, there were like 25 employees left, and they laid off all the underwriters, all the salaried people, who would work. And what do they think they did? They put all that work on us, the brokers, the salespeople. They're like, all right, we're going to need you to do about 3 times the amount of the work now, and you're going to get paid like maybe half the amount. Good luck with that. And I'm like 23 years old, first job out of college. I'm like, what's going on here? I don't want to quit my first job. I want to keep working, but so that led me to ask a lot of questions, and I've always kind of had a inquisitive mind, and I don't just take no for an answer. And if something doesn't make sense to me, I'm the guy that like raises my hand and says like, this doesn't make sense. I'm that person in class. Sometimes with some weird teachers and things, I'd tell the vibe wasn't great, so I would kind of shut up. But that really made me uncomfortable when I would like go along with the lesson plan in school, but I didn't know what was going on. But I felt like I'd be chastised if I spoke up, So I always tried to speak up, and I just used that curiosity, and then I started using the internet and YouTube and stuff and learning about how, central banks and the money supply really works. And it's fascinating. It's way different than most people can imagine. Like, for example, there's something called fractional reserve lending. So these banks, like you look in your bank account, and maybe you have, $5,000 in your Chase bank account or your Bank of America or something. Well, guess what? Bank of America has taken that $5,000 and they've lent out 9 times that amount. So $45,000 up to, to somebody else. So they're literally creating, more money. And it just keeps creating more and more money through these, loans. It's called fractional reserve lending. There's laws on this stuff, and this is how it works. Then it's just a whole rabbit hole. I don't know if we want to get into all of it right now, but it's really fascinating when you learn how this stuff actually works, and you realize that the dollar was detached from gold in 1971 when Richard Nixon took us off the gold standard. And you realize that 1913 was another significant year, when the Federal Reserve was created. And paper money used to be a receipt for that gold. Now it's just a promissory note. If you look on the note, it says that it's a Federal Reserve note. And if you actually look up what they're promising in return, it's no longer gold. It's the full faith and credit of the United States government. That's the official, that's what they're promising.
Wow.
Whatever the fuck that means, Rowan.
It's
Could
like
you get
an IOU or something? Some kind of weird thing.
It's like Dumb and Dumber, right? With Jim
Monopoly
Carrey.
money. It's fake.
It's Monopoly money, and as soon as people figure that out, that it's all just made up, we made it all up. And this is why George Carlin's a genius. Is like, we made it up, people. It's like, just get it through your brain. We made all this shit up. This whole society, all these rules, everything. That's why I tell people there's natural law, science, biology, real things, astrophysics, and then there's human laws, man-made laws like attorneys, governments. These are all just things that we made up as people to control other people. And it's really funny when you start thinking about the difference between those two, because so many people haven't even we're not really taught to think like that in school, right?
Right.
What do you do in America when you're, 5 years old or 6, 7, 8 in elementary school? Yeah, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for Richard stands. I literally thought until 3rd grade that it was Richard stands. I was like, who is Richard stands? It's for which it stands. Because you don't know what the hell you're doing. They're just telling you to repeat this stuff, right? You're learning language. You're like a little kid. You're 5. You're just listening to, that's what kids do. I can see it in my 4-month-old son now. They're
You're gonna
observing the
homeschool 'em?
environment, and they're mimicking, right? They're mimicking the environment. I wrote until, I don't know, maybe it was like second grade or first grade. But it's for some point, I thought it was Richard Stantz. I thought he was like one of our founding fathers or something.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah, and there's, it just shows you, like, if you're just honest about it, this is how kids work, this is how the associative brain works. And then you get old and you become an adult and you realize, like, holy shit, I'm an adult, but I'm a big dummy, right? If you're humble, like, I know that I'm smarter than, like, most people because I've just studied all this smart people to get this smart. But I also know that I'm a big, big, big dummy if I'm humble.
I'm pretty dumb.
Because we know how much we don't know,
Yeah.
right? And I know that I'm on this continuous journey to get smarter and smarter and smarter. That's my motivation. I want to get smarter. I'm not attached to ideas as like my identity. See, most people are attached to ideas like that's mine. I'm not giving that up. I'm this, I'm that. I'm a Democrat. I'm a Republican. I'm whatever. I'm a socialist, whatever. Just strip all yourself of titles. Focus on the facts. Focus on reality. And I hate to say it, but like free market economics and Austrian economics is like the way to go. And unfortunately, like most people don't see it this way at all. Things are moving more in the opposite towards socialism and UBI, right? Universal basic income.
Mm-hmm.
And what is democracy? Democracy is, you've heard that saying, democracy is a couple of sheeps and a wool arguing over what's for dinner, right? Or something along those lines. I might have butchered it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like,
it's the illusion of freedom.
Yeah, and that's why listen to Naval Ravikant, that 3.5 hour How to Get Rich Without Getting Lucky. He just drops so much wisdom in there. And he's such a genius on society and history and politics and how things work. And I've really learned a lot from him about this stuff. And, one thing that he talks about is what's scary about democracy and becoming more socialistic that we're going in is it's basically just voting. We're just all voting on like what we want to happen. And if you have more and more people who believe in socialism more and more and more, then and they all want stuff for free, and then people start to believe that we just get stuff for free. Like, at what point does this whole thing just break down and be like, well, who's making all this stuff, right?
Right.
And that's kind of where the Atlas Shrugged comes in, right? Because you have all these super wealthy people who are vilified. A lot of people hate Elon Musk and a lot of these wealthy tech billionaires. When really, in reality, like, yeah, they're not perfect, they're people, but they've created like some incredible things that like has created so much value that we all use, And if those people, what you find is like the Elon Musk of the world, they're not motivated by money at all. Like they never really were, and they're certainly not now. They're motivated in like improving their lives and the lives of the people on the planet. Elon Musk is addicted to what he's doing. He's not going to stop. He's worth $40 billion. If his net worth went down to $4 billion or 400 million, wouldn't change. I mean, he'd be upset, right? He'd be emotionally distraught for a while. He'd just keep going, being him, right? He's past the motivation of like money and stuff like that. From some of the wealthiest people like Warren Buffett and stuff, I've learned that, and Ray Dalio runs the largest hedge fund on the planet. He doesn't run it anymore, but he founded it. He's in the process of retiring. It's literally a game to them, and I cannot stress that enough. Warren Buffett, Ray Dalio, they talk about the markets and money. It's literally a game. It's a never-ending board game or video game, but it's real life, and it affects them, like money creation, wealth creation, stock market and stuff. It's the most fun and fascinating game ever, and it's always changing, and it's always humbling you. And like, yeah, becoming an investor like really changes your perception about everything, because you can't understand what's really going on in politics and the zeitgeist of the global geopolitical scene if you don't understand like economics. You won't understand it at all, because all of these politics are being driven by economics.
How about libertarianism? Is Elon Musk a libertarian? I don't know his politics very well. I wonder if do you know?
Elon Musk has a tweet from relatively recently, a few months ago or so, something like that, I think. where he says something along the lines of like, I'm actually a socialist. However, I'm a socialist in like this form. And he's talking about like, he's basically, I mean, just look at his actions, not his words, you know? He's working his ass off every single day to improve technology on the things that matter the most to him. So to him, he's really, really worried that we're just going to like destroy the whole planet with climate change and with just forget even climate change. Like nobody knows how much oil we have on the planet. Nobody knows. You know, there's these small groups of people like OPEC. They have way more information than most of us, right? And OPEC Plus, which is run by Russia. However, they don't know. They know what their reserves are, and they've done probably the most intense studies on the other reserves and things. But eventually, we're going to run out of oil if we don't move to sustainable energy. And if you're a life extensionist and you want to live hundreds or thousands of years or however long, you know, reality will let you, then you better be also focused on sustainable energy. Because I can't imagine, could you imagine if we ran out of oil right now? I don't think people know. It's not just like cars and transportation. Oil turns into plastic and like makes all this, like, what do you think all this stuff is made out of? What do you think all of this stuff is? Everything, you know?
Right.
Our economy would come to a screeching, grinding halt. We would go back to just being primitive in fact, it'd be worse than primitive creatures because none of us would have the skills of our ancestors. We wouldn't know how to. Do you know how to do anything, Rowan? Like what we know how to do.
I know we just get
is
like these
stuff
computers
2020.
delivered to us, and it's just like it's
Totally.
crazy. It's like how does this
Rowan,
work?
like
It's like
I watch.
magic.
We you know, we hop on Skype and you share your screen and I watch you do editing work like for me on YouTube or do Adobe work and I'm like make memes and I'm like, dude, you're like a magician because I don't know how to do this shit. I never learned those skills. And it's cool to watch you do that because those are very unique skills you have. Well, if the whole global economy like shut down, right, and the internet shut down, like those skills mean nothing. Do you know how to like grow your own food and like farm and like do stuff like that? So that's why I think that it's just probably a smart idea to have diverse skill sets, and that's why I love going out to my brother's farm and watching him learn and working out with him out in the farm and learning more about that stuff, how to be self-sustainable. And man, these are interesting times right now where who's laughing now? You know, I bet the prepper, if you have a prepper YouTube channel or like show in the last few years, that those have kind of become more popular since the '08 crash. I bet those shows are going viral right now. Don't you think?
Yeah, just today I was watching one of the YouTube. It's like primitive survival skills channel. Had like 10 million views, and he has like 10 million subscribers, and his videos get like sometimes over 20 million views. And he just like shows like how to build a house in the forest and just like how to build crazy stuff. And he's so good at it.
Now I wonder how many views he had like, you know, 6 months ago. Probably not as many.
Yeah, he's definitely super popular. But yeah, it's so important. Survival skills. My parents are super survivalists, so they kind of raised me with that survivalist mentality and like food storage. And they were these people who were concerned with Y2K and they're that whole crowd of people. So they trained me to be like wanting to be a survivalist type person. And but libertarianism, like this is so important because would you like if you had to identify the political system, would you call yourself libertarian?
I would call myself a voluntarist,
Oh.
which is you know, they're very, very similar things. Like, so I think there's a lot of libertarians, and that's like way more popular of a term. But if you understand voluntarism, most libertarians actually get converted into that, or basically say like, yeah, I'm that too, but that's not as popular as a term.
Okay.
You know? So voluntarism is really simple. I mean, Roger explained it in my interview, my first interview with him and this one.
I love that
It's
part.
essentially like, hey, nobody's forcing you and I to do this right here. Is anybody forcing people to watch this live chat or if you're watching the video later? No. And you realize that as an adult, it's different for children because children kind of need structure in their life and parents and certain things, so they can't always live their life in just voluntary exchanges. some of us are not in a financial situation, actually most of us, where we can really like choose. You have choices, right, of who to be employed by or to employ yourself to a certain extent, right? I'm sensitive to, I mean, we've already talked about Chinese slave labor camps for the people on the lowest of the social credit score during this live stream, right? There's horrible things going on in North Korea and African dictatorships and all over the planet. Venezuela's a mess. Like, I'm very sensitive of that. But in general, as an adult, you get more opportunity to interact and make choices on a voluntary basis. And really, the only difference here where this completely changes is when you have government involved. And they actually don't use violence as much, but they use the threat of violence to coerce you to do things they want you to do. And so, for example, if you don't pay your taxes, then the IRS is gonna probably send you an email or a letter in the mail or something and say, hey, looks like you didn't pay your taxes. This is what you owe us. You need to pay it by this date. If you say, well, I can't pay that, then you need to start making a deal with them. If you say, I'm not going to pay that, and they say, well, you need to pay this. This is the law. And you say, well, I'm not going to pay it. Well, then what are they doing? They're going to give you a threat of violence, right?
Yeah.
They're going to say, well, we're going to throw you in a cage, right? And you say, well, that's not a threat of violence. Well, it actually is, because if you say, well, I'm not going to let you throw me in a cage, then they're going to say, well, then we're going to send our thugs in their costumes with guns to come and get you and force you into a cage. So that is how government coerces things and gets things that they want. They have a monopoly on two things. They have a monopoly on the power to coin money, so they have a monopoly on money, and they have a monopoly on violence. And if you take the first one away, the second one goes away naturally. So that's why cryptocurrency is such a powerful idea, like Bitcoin Cash, because it can literally strip a massive amount of that power away from government. It's not going to happen overnight, but it's truly decentralized, and nobody controls it, and it's powerful enough to where it's very difficult to be hacked right now. Bitcoin's even much harder than Bitcoin Cash to be hacked. And it can become more difficult to be hacked the more people join the network, because it puts more computing power in there to protect the network. And so it could get to a point where we could get our freedom back. It could be like digital gold, because this is, I have this book back there, The Ascent of Money. Most people have no idea about history. Like, this new thing is only about 400 years old, of like governments taking over, the right to coin money, and then slowly detaching money from gold, because gold's been money for at least 5,000 years, and really it's been more since the beginning of written history. Gold has been primarily money first and silver second. And these are economic laws why gold is money and silver is second. Like the actual chemistry of gold, it doesn't degrade. It's easy to melt and turn into different, pieces. So it's easily transportable. It's fungible. It's all these properties, these characteristics of money. They've just, the elite have really the governments and the elite of the planet and the central banks is really a story of them really evolving money to the point where it is now. I mean, they want to make it all digital, right? So it's going to all be digital. It's about 92% of the world's fiat money. So when I say fiat money, that means like the Federal Reserve note, the US dollar, euro, Japanese yen, Chinese yuan, on and on and on, right? All the currencies of the planet, they're called fiat currencies. 92% of them are already digital, okay? And soon it's going to be 100%. Their governments are getting rid of cash, and COVID-19 is just one more reason to get rid of cash. And in one way, like, I totally get it. It's dirty money. Like, literally, it's got, stripper juice on it and coke all in it from strip clubs and viruses and all sorts of nastiness, right? So the question is, we're going digital 100%. Do you want to live in a reality where governments are centralized, controlling the whole money supply digitally, tracking everywhere that you go through their corporations that they're tied into through Apple Pay? And
it gives them so much control, because at that point they can basically
unlimited power. They
could basically be like, hey, like, if you don't take the vaccine, like we're gonna turn your money chip off. You're not gonna get to buy anything, and you can't do any business.
You're exactly correct, Rowan. And you know the way out of this, man? It's cryptocurrency, dude. It's Bitcoin Cash, because it's decentralized and they don't control it. It's private too, So this is how powerful it is, really. It's not This isn't just like my Bitcoin Cash, has gone down in value in the last like year or so. This isn't just about like investing in money to me. This is the most political thing that you can possibly do, investing in Bitcoin Cash, in my opinion, because you're stamping, a hard stamp. You're drawing your line in the sand and saying, this is a political movement. This is what I believe. This is how I take power away from corrupt governments and put the power back into the individual, the people, where it has been for thousands of years and has been stripped from people over the last few hundred. I know the whole history of like how all this stuff came about. It's in that book, Ascent of Money. You should watch the documentary too of the same name on YouTube, The Ascent of Money. You see John Locke, how he actually got the French government to just start using the receipts from the gold as money. He was like, wait a minute, why are we all passing around all this gold and stuff people can get it stolen from? It's like really good logic when you think about how money's evolved. We're like, we'll hold the gold, we'll protect it, we'll give them this paper receipt that will be the receipt. They can turn it in whatever and get their gold, but just make this paper the actual, money. It's less, it's a better insurance, and that's kind of how that came about. That was in the 1600s. And then now it's evolved to, of course, where it is now. And if you can track and see where money's going and you can get ahead of that, fintech is a huge, huge industry. And that's how you can, make a whole lot of money by predicting. Like, I don't know if you remember this part from Roger Ver. He said the Wayne Gretzky quote. Investing's like Wayne Gretzky's quote about hockey. You don't want to skate to where the puck is. You want to skate to where the puck is going. And that's the game theory of investing that I love so much about it. If you can start to create a mental model of reality and how it works, and you can start predicting things. But investing is so humbling because if you're wrong, you lose money. If you're right, you make money. So you're incentivized to be right. So all these people who are stuck in their whole, echo chambers and bubbles of nonsense, right? I'm not interested in that at all, because if I don't understand reality correctly and I'm wrong, then I lose money, and I don't want to do that. So I know it sounds like I'm being a little bit contradictory because of Bitcoin Cash, but I also make sure that I'm not just like losing money in Bitcoin Cash. And I think that even though it's gone down in the short term, if people understand how this works, it could skyrocket like at any point in time. And now it's getting interesting with COVID-19 and everything and all inflation, because there's only 21 million Bitcoin Cash ever. There's never going to be any more of them. So, whereas, with the dollar, who knows? There could be, who knows how many dollars there are out there right now and how many there will ever be. The Federal Reserve just keeps creating more and more and more of them. It's crazy. But to be fair, it's actually working really well in the last few months. Even though the dollar has inflated and our dollars have gone down in value due to inflation, the dollar has actually gone up compared to like every other major currency. The Australian dollar, the Japanese yen, the euro, the Chinese yuan. All the other major currencies have gone down relative to the dollar. So us Americans are actually wealthier now compared to others. So like America is winning, actually, even though the coronavirus is hurting us economically. That's why the stock market is actually doing relatively well here the last few weeks since it had that big crash in the U.S., because the dollar has been strengthening because it's still the world's reserve currency. So
wow, this whole Bitcoin thing, it's a big putting the pieces of the puzzle together. It's a big piece of the puzzle of freedom, because I've really been interested in the idea of freedom. That's why I voted for one. I wanted to vote for Ron Paul too when he was running. I don't think I voted that year. That's weird now that I think about it. But I was always a big supporter.
Yeah, I mean, he had no chance of winning.
Yeah, I think that's why I didn't vote. But I had a Ron Paul blog and everything. I was writing articles on my Facebook. And your interview with Roger Ver, you talked about even like the legalization of prostitution, and that was actually one of Ron Paul's. That was actually one of his stances that he was pushing, and I agreed with that too, because that's like it's like a freedom. People should be able to do what they want with their own bodies.
It's a complete joke to even try and say that you're going to outlaw it. It's never going to work. It never does. It just preys on the less fortunate.
Yeah, you gave a good point there. It actually it drives it into the black market where it's not regulated, so there's a potential for abuse there. You know,
Right.
it's the same way with drugs. If you don't
It's
if
the
you don't
same. It's the
legalize
same
drugs,
as the drug war.
you create a black
And then
market.
what happens? What does government do, Rowan? Government tries to get monopoly on certain things so that they can enrich themselves, right? So the CIA has been caught many times shipping in drugs on their planes and stuff, you know? So that's why, the Bush senior, who's dead now, George H.W. Bush, he ran the CIA from 1972 to 1980. Then he was vice president during Nixon from 1980 to 88. And then he was president from 88 to 92. Okay? This is a man who led, the war on drugs, which, of course, it was clearly to enrich him and his thug friends in the CIA and other areas of government. It's the oldest trick in the book, man. You make something illegal, you get a monopoly on it, it artificially drives up the price of it, and you get to monopolize it and sell it at like ridiculously inflated prices and profit off of it. That's what they do with everything. That's what they're doing with money itself, and that's what they do with drugs as well too.
Yeah, and that's
And
also
it's
why
just
they don't let certain drugs, because it competes with the pharmaceutical industry. So it's always just blown my mind that they've made like marijuana illegal and all these drugs.
right.
It's so evil. Like how are people putting up with this? And like
I mean, people are getting more educated and we're fighting back. And now not only is marijuana, cannabis legal in California, but it's actually an essential medicine that you can actually now in COVID-19 leave your house to get. I mean, think about that. We went from cannabis, marijuana, being illegal pretty much most of our lives since we grew up. And now it's completely flipped to where it's actually an essential medicine, according to the state of California. I mean, it just shows that I did not think, man, if you were to ask me that 10 years ago, I'd be like, no way, man, you're crazy. You've been smoking too much of that reefer. But it's happened, so it is inspiring and it shows that things can change, but things tend to change really, really slowly, man, is what I'm kind of learning as I get older.
This is so relevant
you,
for us because of like the whole like Liz Parrish issue. How she can't get her gene therapies and the government's like blocking that stuff, right? The government's blocking
right.
progress in what can help us, never die, and the government's like directly. This is why freedom is so important for people who want to, live forever, live indefinitely,
right.
or however you want
to say it.
It's the most
simple thing. You own your body, right? You own your mind, your body. Nobody else owns it. There's no government entity or any other person who can tell you what to do with your body as long as you're not hurting somebody else. They can create laws. They can do whatever they want. There's laws against suicide, okay? Think of how ridiculous and asinine and egotistical that is. Only a government or a psychopath could come up with this type of a law, right? Imagine once you realize that governments are just made up of people and they're actually strangers wearing costumes and like having a flag outside, their building that they walk into, you start to realize how ridiculous this whole stuff is. It becomes like religion, like a child, right? And once you see a magic trick, you see how it works, then the illusion doesn't work anymore. You're like, pay no attention to that man behind the curtain. Like, yeah, but I've already seen the man behind the curtain. I saw he was the one putting up the whole wizard smoke and everything and the noises. I already saw it, man. The gig's up, right? So once you start educating yourself about these ideas, you can't go back to like being a socialist, okay? Once you're educated about economics, history, money, how these things actually work, the idea of libertarianism and really the idea of voluntarism, you can't go back, right? Because this just makes too much sense, okay? So think of how ridiculous it was if I were to say, Rowan, you are not allowed to commit suicide. It is, I Brent Nally, make that illegal, punishable by, I don't know, make it up. I'll throw you in a cage if you try, or I'll kill you if you try. Like, what is the worst thing I can do, right? You own your own life. And you know what's best for yourself and your family, not some stranger far off in a, building wearing a costume that you've never met. You own your own life, you own your own consciousness, and you're able to do whatever you want to your body as long as you're not hurting somebody else. It's such a simple concept. I don't know any rational person who can disagree with that. And yet, that's not how our society is set up. It's not at all. And if it was, then you would see incredible amounts of economic flourishment and technological progress. So that's why these ideas are really important. They actually relate back to
And
longevity
health, like even like raw
tremendously.
milk. Think about it. They've made raw milk illegal in like almost all the states. Raw milk,
Right.
and that's something
Because
people have
why is
eaten
it
forever, drinking raw milk all the time.
exactly? Because with raw milk, there is a higher probability that you could catch, certain things like what salmonella or basically get sick. However, at the same time, it has so much more healthy things in it that most of the other garbage milk filled with hormones and antibiotics and all sorts of things in it don't have. But government is all about avoiding risks because they don't want, lawsuits and things like that. So that's the main reason I think that they've made raw milk illegal because it's always the small, right? That's the reason all of our rights are getting infringed upon right now because of COVID-19, which has killed, I don't know, as we're live streaming right now, maybe 115,000 people globally. That's about how many people die from aging every single day anyways. You don't see the world shutting down over that, right? And it's not, aging isn't a virus, it's not transmittable, but my general point is that if you just analyze this stuff a little bit more, it all just breaks down. It doesn't make any sense at some point, and you realize that it's really strange because it's a clown world in some ways because sometimes, like, let's just take things isolated. Look at cannabis, for example. It's become illegal in like the 1920s or 30s. It was William Randolph Hearst who owned paper, big newspaper, and he ran this campaign in his newspaper to make cannabis illegal because of this whole story, because he was afraid that the hemp industry was going to come in and basically overtake him because he was super invested in his newspaper industry. And so he knew that hemp was like similar to marijuana. So he ran this campaign against like marijuana, right? And he said that that's why it was actually called marijuana, because that was the Mexican, Spanish term for cannabis, right? And he said that he knew that Americans were essentially racist against Mexicans at the time. So that was part of the campaign. There's even this ridiculous movie called Reefer Madness about this, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've heard they're smoking marijuana cigarettes, right? And so, but think about this. This was propaganda that was approximately like 90 years ago, right? It's a lie. It's what propaganda is. And it took us this long because once a generation believes something, it takes so much momentum to turn it back. And that's how this is a huge idea that people don't understand about laws. My dad's an attorney. Both my uncles are attorneys. I was pre-law. I took the LSAT. I was going to go. I did an internship with the DA's office. And then I realized I didn't want to go into debt. And I was ready to just get out into the world and make money. But one thing that people don't fully understand, and even if they understand it, I don't think they appreciate the impact of law, is that once a law is in place, this is how laws work, like everywhere. This is not just the US. Once a law is in place, that sets the precedent for that thing, that type of environment or situation that occurred. So then a judge, when something similar happens, like let's say something happens for the first time, like let's say that's the first, rewind back to when automobiles were brand new, and then you have the first automobile accident. Well, the judges and all the jury is going to really observe like what happened here, and they're going to make a law based off that whole environment. And then the next automobile accident, they're going to look at the first ruling of the automobile accident to then make that ruling. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So because marijuana became illegal, the longer this goes on, the more it's just permeated and everybody just believes, oh yeah, that's horrible, it's bad, we all know that, it's illegal, don't even look at it, you're wasting your time. What are you doing? Investigating this? Like looking at the science of marijuana? It's bad. It's bad. So this lie just gets perpetrated and permeated throughout culture for more and more years, but it's not true. That's why I keep always saying, Rowan, focus on truth. Do you know how many lies there are out there in our society? I think it's so crazy right now that in 2020, we have video recording of all this footage, right? And like I said, it's all going to be on servers probably for a very long time. It's documented what the world is like. All these fat, disgusting slobs, honey boo boo, and shit like that. We are completely deformed from garbage, preservative food, herbicides, pesticides, nonsense, things like that. At some point, I think we will evolve out of this. I don't know when that will be. I'm more of an optimist. Hopefully, it will be within the next few hundred years. But they have all of this recorded. They're gonna, whatever we evolve into as humans, they're gonna look back at this and like honey boo boo, and they're gonna be like, oh my goodness, this is what happens when you drink 17 Mountain Dews per day and eat nothing but ding dongs. You turn into this deformed, like Jabba the Hutt creature, right?
They're gonna make Clown World the documentary, showing all this footage.
Right. But in the other end of the spectrum, Rowan, think about the more we learn about health, longevity, we're going to turn into like superhumans. Like that's what my son, he'll be 5 months on the 20th in 7 days from now. He's only had like really good breast milk from his mom. She's getting like plenty of sleep. So her cortisol levels are down. We're keeping stress levels down. She's eating healthy organic foods. We made sure we were as healthy as possible before, I impregnated her and she got conceived, because there's a lot of research that shows that that's really important. Like, 6 months up to conception, like being really healthy, intermittent fasting, all that kind of stuff. And and now to me, it's not really a huge surprise that my son is hitting all of the benchmarks like early before, like, babies are supposed to like roll over for the first time at 4 to 6 months. Well, he rolled over at 3 months and 6 days. And that's like, I Googled it and it's crazy. Like most babies don't roll over then. He's like doing talking and he's like basically developing earlier than most babies on everything. And it's because we're like scientifically engineering everything that we know from the science of like how to create a superhuman. And I just want to focus on making this kid like as smart and incredible as possible. And then what's going to happen? He's going to be 20 years old maybe, and hopefully if we do our job right as parents, there'll be some genius, and they'll be like, oh wow, this kid's just a genius. I guess he just got lucky. No, like we worked our ass off at parents. Like Vitalik Buterin, he created Ethereum, right? The cryptocurrency that's second in market cap to Bitcoin. Well, I'm connected on LinkedIn with his dad, who, like I told you, like Sergey Brin, the co-founder of Google, like their dad was a computer scientist at University of Michigan. Vitalik Buterin's dad is super into longevity and computer science, so he raised Vitalik Buterin growing up in this. He didn't just like become a genius by luck, right? And so we just need more like intelligent people having babies, and unfortunately it's going the opposite. All the dumb and broke people are having more and more kids, and the wealthy, intelligent people are not busy having kids because kids are a lot of work, and they take the three most things that everybody wants more of: time, money, and energy. That's really what we all want more of: time, money, and energy. And kids take all three of those things. Yes, they are great in many ways. I love my son. I would never change it. He's incredible. But like sometimes it's hard for me to just get shit done because I'm taking care of him, And we spent a pretty decent amount of money relative to our network. It's basically relative to our net worth. The amount of money we spent on him is basically negligible. But for some people, like if you only had $10,000, holy shit, having him would have crippled us. You know what I mean? We'd have to make those tough decisions. Are we going to buy diapers, or are we going to like feed ourselves? Right? I don't know. Those decisions are horrible, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I just ranted for a while there.
That's a very lucky kid you got there. Very lucky.
I hope so, man. You never know. We don't try to take anything for granted. Anything bad could happen at any point. So we're just trying to be humble and appreciative of what we have. And
he was breastfed, I'm sure, of course, right?
Oh, still, yeah. He hasn't had any type of food other than breast milk.
That's awesome.
That's all he's ever had.
That's so awesome.
And there's
That's so important.
There's exosomes in breast milk. There's insulin-like growth factor 1 in breast milk, cytokines, all sorts of shit we probably don't even know of. I mean, he's getting super growth, yummy yummies. Breast milk's incredible. I thought about having some of it myself, but I don't know. It's kind of weird. honestly.
I wouldn't blame you for having it. I mean, freak. I think it's incredible. They should have. It wouldn't surprise me if certain people already, the elites, are just drinking human breast milk. They have human breast milk farms, and just
Yeah. They very well could be. I got a bunch in the freezer. I don't know. I've thought about it. It's too weird to me. I can't like think about drinking my wife's breast milk. I don't know. I just
maybe
something
just
I.
a little
But maybe
bit at
that's what
least.
all the answers are, Rowan. Maybe that is what it is.
It's like it's a natural vaccine, you know. Like it's amazing. It's amazing.
Oh, the more you learn about breast, just having a kid has humbled us, and we've learned so much about health and like, if my kid is sick, then when he breastfeeds my wife, his saliva transfers to her, her to her body, and then she immediately creates antibodies to make him healthy. Vice versa, if my wife is sick and he's breastfeeding, then those antibodies go into him, and he creates them to make her healthy. I mean, they're like, that's why they call the first 3 months after birth the fourth trimester. I mean, it really, and when you're actually living it and you're like, oh my gosh, this thing needs to eat like every 1 or 2 hours the first 3 months, and it has to sleep all the time. It's pooping like sometimes he'd poop every like 20 minutes. Like, I just changed his diaper, I'm changing it again. I mean, you're like, okay, this thing really is basically like still attached to its mom. It can't really survive. And then you think about how we've been not breastfeeding children, but we've been giving children like formula since like the 1950s. The formula stuff is complete garbage. And then the boomers, are having all these health problems now because they were fed formula 50, 60, 70 years ago. It's no surprise to me. So,
Yep. And just think about like people's little health problems that they get from their bad upbringing or whatever. It can just spiral. I mean, that little, like, it's like the butterfly effect. A little health problem from some little thing they did wrong as a child, or they got some kind of abuse, or their childhood wasn't good enough in some way. That little thing can turn into something huge in their life and ultimately lead to their death, Just so
right.
huge. Like all the people with all their mental problems nowadays and all their physical problems, a lot of these things just started off as some little small thing during their upbringing. And it just spiraled off into this huge thing, and they die and got addicted to some drugs and just trying to cope with their problems. It's just horrible.
Yeah, it's really, really fascinating stuff. There's a good show on Netflix called Diagnosis that my wife and I watched last year, and it's all about this lady who's a healthcare professional. I think she's a medical doctor. And each episode was about somebody who had some very strange medical condition that all the best doctors, in America and all over the world, like in Europe and stuff, they just couldn't find a diagnosis. They couldn't figure out what's wrong with this person. And so they basically crowdsourced it using social media and certain things to like use videos and Facebook and stuff to like send it out there, and they were able to get a diagnosis for a lot of their conditions. And in some cases, like, it's pretty extreme psychological stuff that's probably too out there for most people to consider. But there's people who they found out they had deep psychological problems, like going back to a young age, that was actually manifesting and causing like these horrible symptoms. And they didn't need drugs, they didn't need surgery to cure their cancer or to cure this condition or that. They just needed to audit their own thoughts. They needed to think about their emotional memories and things and their traumas from when they were younger, and change their thought process about those things, to change the chemicals in their brain and the pump. The biggest thing that people don't realize is, like, you're not just a genetic makeup. You have consciousness, right? And your consciousness is constantly creating certain chemicals and hormones. That's what the placebo effect is. That's why the placebo effect is so powerful, because your brain can create these chemicals to heal yourself, and really not just your brain, your whole body. And that's why the nocebo effect is so powerful too, because the nocebo effect is just as powerful as the placebo effect, but in the opposite. And so many people don't even know what that is. Like, doctors don't even know what the nocebo effect is. It's why you have like old couples, who've been married for 60 years. One of them's 82 years old and dies. What do you hear? 3 months later, the wife dies,
Yeah.
right? It's the nocebo effect. It's like, yes, they were connected physically and they had certain routines and certain things that disrupted their biology, but really they just get sad and they died. And it's the whole use it or lose it type thing. That's how the universe works. If your brain, if you lose the will to live, right, because your loved one died or for whatever reason, you start sending those chemical, you start creating those chemical signals to go to all your cells that tells them, we're done, time to shut it down, you know? And that stuff is super powerful. And it is a scientific concept. Unfortunately, there's not enough research going on in this stuff. And when you start talking like this to most people, they just think that you're crazy. They don't understand. It's like science. They don't understand like your pituitary gland in your brain creates certain hormones, you know, like cortisol and endorphins. And this stuff is just super important. It's very important for Cincinnatians to stay healthy. So, oh man,
Very true.
it's late, dude.
Yeah.
What? How do you want to sign off? Because I gotta run soon.
Yeah, let's just sign off. That was really wonderful. You gave a lot of smart ideas there that I 100% agree with.
You too, man. This was fun. We talked about everything: simulation theory, nocebo effect.
Yeah.
How long have we been going? Oh wow, 3 hours.
Yep. Yeah. Any
Felt
closing
like
thoughts? Yeah, I don't have nothing. Just
I don't know. Felt like 30 minutes. I can't believe over 3 hours just went by. I'm exhausted though. Wow, it's 11:18. I need to get to bed.
yeah, my brain's kind of fried too. We'll do this again. Oh, hey, let's test this out. Everyone, go subscribe. Give your subscribe plug. How would you plug that they're needing to subscribe?
Just Brent Nally is my YouTube channel, BrentNally, and Rowan made a great little subscribe little thingy there that I'm going to be putting in my YouTube videos with the click noise and the little ring the bell and click all. It's so important to click all because that's really going to help bring more people to find our content. You know, all of our channels, Rowan's channel, my channel, Transhumania, all the channels will be on. I'm going to be working for Leaf, Lifespan.io's YouTube channel. And click all because it really helps the algorithms go to the next level so that this content goes higher and higher up the filter so more people can find it. You know, we have to use every method we possibly can to live as long and healthy as possible. And it's so simple. You're going to get emails when we create the videos, but you should be watching all of them anyways. So hopefully it's not a huge inconvenience. I'd say only do that for the longevity channels or the ones you care about the most because it really does have an impact. And yeah.
Well said. Yeah, go subscribe. Links in the description. Thank you everyone for watching. Let's cure aging. We're gonna do it. We can do it.
Cool, Rowan. I'm going to sign off. We'll talk soon.
All right. Bye, Brent.
See ya. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here.
Bye.